Tonight, Gotham Academy shows us that on a long enough time scale, everything eventually evolves into bats. Earth 2 spends an entire issue giving origin stories to characters that have yet to have a single line of dialogue, and Green Arrow still has Felicity Smoke. I'm sure I said something similar last month, but hey, I'm still pissed off about it. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 166 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host and it is an entirely unimportant day. I'm sure nothing is happening in the world at all on this November 5th. It's practically just any other Tuesday, and I definitely did not title this week's episode to reflect my feelings about today. But I won't be talking about that. But just know it's simmering under my skin, and it is desperate to get out. So, let's focus on comics. Yes, escapism. That's what we need right now. So, we have a total of 15 comics coming out this week. Some of them good, some of them bad, most of them bad, but we will talk about them regardless. So, in no particular order, we have Detective Comics, Gotham Academy, Grayson, Action Comics, Superman Unchained, Green Lantern, Aquaman and the Others, Earth 2, Green Arrow, Justice League 3000, Lobo, Swamp Thing, and then our 3 weeklies, Batman Eternal, Earth 2 World's End, and Future's End. So, what's important out of that? What do you need to know? Well, Green Lantern's still part of the Godhead event, as it always will be. That's really kind of it. Detective Comics, the second of a two-parter, like a little guest thing. Not really that big of a deal. The only other thing that's worth super noting is Superman Unchained, which began like a year and a half ago, and we finally got the 9th and final issue. I'm not saying that that book should have been 12 issues and released within a year, but I'm also not saying that Jim Lee knows what a deadline is. So draw your own conclusions from that. Beyond that, there's nothing else to really say, so I guess I'll just go ahead and jump right on into the episode with probably Green Lantern. Green Lantern number 36, written by Robert Venditti, art by Francis Portela and Scott McDaniel. So this is continuing the Godhead event. Technically the last issue was Sinestro, but more importantly for this one, previously the Green Lantern crew led by Hal Jordan got their asses handed to them by a bunch of new gods. So this issue picks up on New Genesis. Orion has been hailed to go see Highfather. Metron's there like, tee-hee, you're in trouble now. And so Orion and Highfather basically just have it out for a few panels, basically saying, Orion wants to go and fight Darkseid. He is strong, he is willing, he has an armada behind him, he is very highly trained, and he's kind of a bit resentful over the fact that these lantern rings are being viewed as the new hotness while he's just been sitting around collecting dust. Meanwhile, Highfather's basically like, bro, if you were just a tool for me to use, you wouldn't be talking so goddamn much. Like, I get that you're strong, but you only see the battle, you don't see the larger war at play. That's always been your issue, and that's the reason that I don't send you in to do these things. I have a way to control these lanterns, and like, if you kill them all, we're not going to be able to use them. So yes, think a little bit. So Orion goes off and he's basically upset and he's like, oh, you know, I think fighting's the only talent I've ever had. So then we follow Hal and the rest of the Green Lantern Corps as they've been forced off of Mogo. And Hal has basically come to the conclusion the only place that we can go is a place that they would never ever in a million years think that we would go. So they are on their way to New Corrigar, the home of the Sinestro Corps. And Sinestro's standing there waiting for him and Lysidrak is like, shit, we got Green Lantern showing up. This is all because of your stupid-ass daughter. I'm sure she brought him here. And Soranik's like, oh, I'm sorry. Are you upset that my father, despite the fact that he could never love anybody ever, cares about me more than he cares about you? Oh, that's so sad. So they're about to start, like, punching each other. And Sinestro's like, ladies, cool it. I know they were going to be here. Nothing on this planet happens without my knowledge. So come with me. And so the Green Lanterns start landing. They're all wounded and whatnot. John Stewart's group is also here after their thing that happened over in Green Lantern Corps. And Sinestro tells Soranik, like, hey, I don't want them seeing you. I want you to be kept separate. And she's like, try me. So she goes down as a medic and starts healing up Salak and a few others who were injured. Hal and John catch up. They figure out what happened in each other's respective books and how they got absolutely handed to each other. Sinestro says, yeah, the Indigo Tribe was also beaten. They're inside the planet as well. We're working on it. And then down from the heavens descend the Guardians. And they're like, hey, everybody, we've been over in the New Guardians book, and there's something you guys should know. The New Gods have the White Lantern, Kyle Rayner. And Hal's like, I'm sorry, Kyle's alive? What? And they also say, like, yes, that's true. He has the most powerful lantern on his side. And Sinestro's like, I'm sorry, the most powerful lantern? What? So at that point, he basically explains everything that happened since the freaking lights out event of how Kyle went in, he came back out, he has the life equation in him, and it's too powerful for any mortal to hold. So they kind of kept him secret the whole time. And St. Walker hears this. He's like, oh my god, Kyle's still alive? Oh my god, is this actually happening right now? It's like, yeah, and it's going to be the end of everything, St. Walker, so cool your jets a little bit. So Hal's basically like, hey, where have you guys been? I haven't seen you all in like a year. You've left me. We had a war. You didn't think to show up for the war? And it's like, we kept an eye on things. You were okay, mostly. And it's like, all right, look, I don't have even near enough Green Lanterns to deal with the New Gods. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. You said that they had all of the different colors, like every color got hit. But I think there's one type of ring that they dared not go after because it scared even them. We could, and then the Guardians are like, nope, shut that down right now. We ain't doing that plan. That's a stupid plan. You're stupid for thinking of it. So they tell him, go back to the drawing board and come up with a new plan. So Hal goes over and he's like just asking the ring, like, tell me everything you can about New Gods. And it's like, High Father, Metron, Orion, anything. Like, give me something. The ring's like, we got nothing. So Hal's looking down on himself. He's like, I don't know how to help you. And then Sinestro comes down. He's like, oh yeah, you're the greatest lantern of all time. This is pathetic. Like, you know the whole reason why you are such a good foil for me and why, like, we work together, the reason that I've ever respected you in any meaning of the word is because you don't follow the rules, Hal. Like, if you were scheming and conniving, I could easily get rid of you. You'd be awful at it. You suck. But you don't. You just follow your instincts, and despite the fact that they make the worst possible decisions, somehow you still manage to keep coming out on top. And now, you're just gonna try to follow the rules? And Hal's like, but I'm in charge of the Green Lanterns. I gotta follow the rules. He's like, that's stupid, and you're stupid for thinking that. So they get into a brief little fight there of talking about, like, oh, blah, 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 our friendship and whatever. And Sinestro basically says, like, look, I could kill you right now because of how stupidly pathetic you are, but I'm not going to because I need you. But I need the old version of you. So get back to your instinct, man. And Sinestro goes to storm off. And Hal's like, so you admire me, huh? And he's like, oh my god, I swear to god, this guy. So turns out they came up with some amount of a plan. The Yellow and Green Lanterns are all making their way into the antimatter universe, over to Quard, and Sinestro's going to be going with, and it's like, yep, you guys just be ready for the call. We'll all be set on the other side. Hal saying, I got to go and make sure that I got everything set up here, but you make sure everyone's ready to fight. And he's like, yep, we'll do. So they shake hands, and we see Hal putting his plan into action. Down on Earth in Coast City, there is a circus that the cops have surrounded. They dare not go in because inside is Black Hand, and he has turned the entire circus into zombies. And there's a ringmaster in the middle being like, oh, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Harry Houdini. And then the actual Harry Houdini comes out, his arms covered in locks, and he just breaks his arms off at the shoulders, and everyone applauds. So then we then see that he has resurrected the Flying Graysons, who are about to perform their trapeze act. And of course, they have nowhere near the limberness that they need to. So the mother of the Flying Graysons starts to fall. Hal comes in, catches her with a Green Lantern ring, and Black Hand's just like, all right, look, I've had to keep myself busy here on Earth because you've been off doing whatever up there. But yeah, is this it? We're just going to fight now? And Hal's like, bro, this is messed up. This is sick, and I hate every minute of this. But I'm not here to fight. There's something big going on up in space, and I need you to help us stop it. So let's take your show on the road. And that's the issue. it's very much a setup issue. Like, whereas the last issue of this was, oh no, here's the threat. This is very much, all right, we're getting the plan together. We're moving things to where we need to move them. Black Hand is obviously going to be a part of that. And yeah, I'm down with that. I think it's certainly an interesting way to go with this, because Black Ring is the one that they did not get their hand on. And it seems like that would be a good counter to the White Ring. So interested to see where that goes. Art style is very good in this. I really don't have any issues with any of the panels at all. It feels like this is all one big Green Lantern event. It's moving through quite nicely. Overall, I'd say it's probably I'll give it a 7.5. It's feeling pretty good for me. Superman Unchained number 9, written by Scott Snyder, art by Jim Lee and Dustin Nguyen. So, last issue, it was a bunch of stuff. Look, this book has been so heavily delayed, I can barely remember anything that's happening. But what I do remember is that the Wraith's alien race is now about to invade Earth from beyond the sun. They disabled all the technology, or at least they're going to, and Lex Luthor tells Superman, hey, I got a win condition for you, but it requires you self-sacrificing yourself. So we then have a flashback, and these flashbacks haven't been around for like 6 issues now, where Clark is being threatened by Old Man Jenkins or whatever. Sorry, Mr. Colder, and he's saying like, oh, I know your boy can fly. He's not from around here. Martha, you must be taken captive mentally from him as well. You think that he's your son. I'm going to take care of him right now. And so he fires off the gun at Clark, but the gun gets aimed over at Martha. Clark freaks out about it and blows Mr. Colder across the farm, and in doing so seemingly has killed him because he hits a wall pretty damn hard. So then we go to Lex telling Clark the plan, saying, yeah, I got you some pure sunlight or whatever. You inject yourself with the solar fuel and you'll explode like 200 megatons, enough to take out all of their things up there in space. So it'll be super cool. And Lois is there like, we don't even know if he's telling the truth. Like, don't sacrifice yourself because this guy's being a dick. And then all of a sudden, Superman gets a call from Batman and Wonder Woman saying, hey, some crazy stuff's happening around the world. We definitely got some signals of something happening. It's all being bad up there. And they say, like, oh, we can get Martian Manhunter to help. We can get Green Lantern up in there. And Superman's like, no, I'm the only one who's fast enough. I'll take care of this. And then all of a sudden, the comms go dead. And he's just like, all right, it started. I need to go. And he's about to fly off. And Lois is like, wait a minute, hold on. Look, why are you doing this? What? Surely we could do something else. And he's like, well, I know it's the right thing to do. She's like, how could you possibly know that? And he says, well, it's because you would do. Or what you would do. So they have a hug. She says, hey, I want to say, and there's a little pregnant pause there before she says thank you. And Superman's like, all right, fair enough, bye. So he flies off into space. We then get back to a flashback of Clark being super upset about hurting Mr. Calder and killing him. And Martha's like, hey, he was old, his heart gave out, it's not you. Like, he was already like dead before he hit the wall. And he's like, no, I don't care, it's not true. So he starts doing CPR. We then see in Metropolis, all the tech starts going out, but like it's all in a controlled descent. So all the stuff like cars and stuff, they slowly come to a halt. All of the technology and computers and stuff slowly go down. We see a plane going down the middle of what is Metropolis's Times Square, but it ultimately lands very safely out in the ocean. So all the planes are slowly being landed. And Lex is basically just sitting there in hologram form talking to Jimmy, Lois, and Lois's dad, saying like, look, I think that this is a whole big thing of Superman like being able to die for us and whatnot. Don't get me wrong, I am aware of how magnificent the situation here is. Don't think that it's gone over my head. And Lois is just like, oh, you're just happy he's dying. Like, you don't know him. You don't know the good he's done. And Lex is like, oh, but Miss Lane, I know him better than any of you. See, you see Superman as this light, this guiding light, this North Star that you can all follow. But I've invented technology in order to trace solar whatevers from the Earth so that I might have been able to backdate Superman's actions to well before any of us even knew about him, to see what sort of man he was, how he guided himself through life. And like I found Wraith. Wraith was a thing, and I didn't expect that one. But I also saw Superman, and Superman was just making it up as he went along. Like, he didn't have a plan. He doesn't have this deep knowledge. Sometimes he took down a dictator, and then a worse dictator showed up. And then Superman thought, oh, well, I won't do that anymore. Sometimes things got worse because he didn't get involved. And then when he did get involved, it got better. And he's like, okay, well, I'll do that. He's not better than us. He's not different from any human. He's just making this up as he goes along. That's the whole thing. And as Lex is going through his little monologue here, we see Superman head out to the far side of the sun. He sees the entire armada. He refuses to inject himself quite yet. He tries just blasting through as many people as he can, but they ultimately hit him with some sort of depowering ray, makes him super weak. And as he realizes he's on the verge of he's not going to be able to do this in a minute, he readies the needle and is about to inject himself with it when all of a sudden Wraith shows up and grabs the needle from him. We then have back to the flashback where Clark has continued performing CPR on Mr. Kuder, and Kuder comes back and he says, hey, you saved my life. And Kuder seems to be pretty happy about that. So then Wraith says, yeah, all right. He doesn't say anything, but he grabs the needle and he's like, I understand. And he injects himself with it, superpowers himself up, gives a salute to Superman, and then like thrusts him back to Earth. And as he is zooming away, Superman is able to watch what is going on. Lex continues to talk, saying like, look, I know Superman's up there totally biting it right now, but like I have to recognize that Superman, we sent messages out into space saying, hey, come help us be better than who we are as people. And I hate the fact that Superman came down theoretically from that. Like, that's stupid. He's not what we need. But in a certain specific way, despite all of his flaws, he may as well have been the closest thing we ever came to being better than ourselves. And as Wraith is going around blasting all of his own species ships, he ends up exploding with, super nuclear force, and all of them are gone. And down on Earth, all the people are able to watch up and see this bright explosion where the sun is, and they're all happy. So we cut to days later. Jimmy's got his hand fixed from whatever Lex did to it. Lois gets a bagel and then calls up Clark. Clark is apparently writing a story about some of the plane survivors from the plane that went through Metropolis, and just like, oh yeah, a little human interest piece in spite of everything else going on. And Lois is like, hey, yeah, no big deal. I'm the one who's writing the story. Alien Armada destroyed. Superman recaptures Lex Luthor. Like, that's the big headline here. But, you seem like you're wanting your job back, Clark. Is that a thing you want? You want to come back to Daily Planet? And he's like, I'm just playing things by ear. I don't know if I go that far quite yet. So Lois basically says like, oh yeah, well, you are missed here. Whenever you want to come back, it's a whole thing. But don't rush back. Follow your instincts and just take a leap. And we see Clark is on top of a corn silo, and he jumps off, and he's super pumped and happy about stuff. So, I kind of glossed over a couple things there in Lex's monologue, but for the most part, the big thing is Superman is not this shining beacon of he always knows right from wrong. He always does like the incredible thing, and he's always like better than everyone else. Superman is human by all intents and purposes, but his major thing is that he always tries to do better, and he always inspires the people around him. That's the moral of the story here, to the point where he got Wraith to betray his own alien group that were going to destroy their planet. So yeah, it's not a bad story. Ultimately, it does come down to, I feel like this was supposed to be a 12-issue series, and the delays kind of kicked it back to, it's like, okay, can we wrap it up in 9? Because this is going on a little bit too long now. Like, the whole thing of Lex just showing up being like, oh yeah, by the way, I was doing all this stuff in the background, tee-hee. Like, no, it feels to me like once the delays started, that's where we started seeing less of Lex, and therefore his plot just kind of had to happen by now. I think if we were given 3 extra issues of this, yeah, it would have fleshed it out a lot more. So it has its flaws. It's not a bad moral to it. The art looks fine. It's just a weird little piece of Superman that it was done for an anniversary. I think it was supposed to be 80 years of Superman, maybe 75. I'm not sure. But it was just a weird little beat where it was like, okay, but it didn't feel like it was saying anything that big. I don't feel like I ever got Superman to actually be unchained in this book. It just feels like Superman meets another enemy, and then he proves why Superman's so cool. That's all I got out of it. So overall, not a horrible book. I'm still going to give this one like, it's shouldering a lot of the series, so it's probably unfair to this issue specifically, but I'm going to give it a 7. I don't know, I expected more from this, I wanted more from this, and ultimately, it just kind of felt rushed by the end. So, what are you going to do? Detective Comics number 36, written by Benjamin Percy, art by John Paul Leone. So this is the second part of the Terminal little mini arc thing going on. Last issue, plane landed in Gotham Airport, had a bunch of dead people on it. Batman was inside, turned out to be a virus. Now the whole airport's on lockdown, and a dude named Magnus Magnuson is claiming terroristic responsibility for it. So we open up this issue with someone, I'm assuming Batman, basically saying like, yeah, nobody's living in the moment. Everyone's all panicky all the time, looking to the future. But like, it's moments like these that really ground you and like take you back into like now. So we see a bunch of people from the CDC coming in wearing like super suits and stuff like that, locking themselves down. Batman talks to his one dude that he's working with, the old guy who's part of security, saying like, okay, 8 hours. That's how long we got. He's the guy on the TV. Magnus is claiming he's in Eastern Europe, so I need to go out and I need to make a call real quick. So Batman leaves the other guy behind, and we cut over to Belarus, where a man is being tortured for some plutonium or something like that, the location of that, when all of a sudden one of the torturers picks up the phone, and it turns out it's Dick Grayson. And Batman's on the other side saying, hey, I need you to do this for me. And he's like, I'm a little bit busy. He's like, no, you're not. This is more important. I need you to find somebody now. And he's like, Bruce, you're sounding like really tired. Are you good? And he's like, I don't know, man. I don't know how much longer I got. So we then see the security guy is talking through his guys, saying like, all right, get everybody cleared over in that area, quarantine everybody else who is anywhere nearby, let's get a team moving. And then CDC comes up saying like, thank you very much, your efforts will not be needed anymore. Who all was inside the plane? And he's like, what, this is my site. He's like, yeah, great, we're the CDC. Who was in the plane? And he's like, just me, no one else. And he's like, no one else? And he thinks about Batman. He's like, yep, no one else. So CDC takes him away, and he's like, cool, we're going to keep an eye on you. You're going to be our test subject. So we cut over to air traffic control, who's just managed to divert all the planes. Batman comes up, and he's like, you guys got to tell me everything you know about the ghost plane. Like, who was on board? What were the records? Give me everything. So we then cut over to Grayson, who continues to torture the guy, and he's like, okay, new plan. You're going to tell me everything you know about this Magnus Magnuson, and you're going to tell me now, like, where to find him. Otherwise, I'm going to start ripping out teeth. And he's like, I don't know nothing. Grayson rips out a tooth. He's like, okay, he sees a woman down at a bar nearby. It's a club. It's called Club Hell. So we see the old man. He's trying to take charge of the situation, but the CDC's just like, no, not anymore. Like, you stay here, stay sitting on this bench. And they start talking to each other about like taking skin samples, blood samples, doing everything they can to track how fast this dude is dying. So we see for some reason, the CDC guy has a gun, and then Batman just comes up and punches the CDC guy out. So he's like, hey, you good, man? Or let's get out of here. You think you can retire in the middle of a job? And he's like, nah, man, I am not okay. I don't think I can get out of here. Like, I have my own history. And he's like, look, I don't care about that. There were 2 soldiers on board of the plane. They were there as an honor guard for a body in the hold area. I think that's where it came from. You got to help me get in there. And then we can think of something, because that's where the source of it is. And he coughs up some blood, and he's like, look, I was working in the Persian Gulf War. Like, we were at a burning oil well. I already had like lung cancer before this. I do not have long to live, period. With or without this virus. This is just speeding it up. I just need to rest. And he lays back down, and Batman's like, is there anything I can do? He's like, yeah, put me on a plane to Hawaii. I want to die surrounded by hula girls. So we see the CDC's taking pictures inside the plane. They're getting bodies loaded out. It's like, all right, we're going to need decontamination shower and all that set up, but we'll get to that later. Right now, someone get me in contact with air traffic control. And they talk to the ATC, and it's just like, oh, well, you guys are a step behind Batman. He was asking for all the same info that you're asking for. It's like, what? Batman's here? And it's like, yeah, I told him about the body in the hold. And so then the head of the CDC is just like, oh, son of a bitch. All right, you come with me. So We then cut over to Belarus again, where there's a bouncer trying to keep Grayson out of the club he needs to go to. Grayson just snaps his fingers, punches the dude in the nuts, and then opens the door up and tells everybody, free drinks inside! So in all the chaos, he manages to slip back into the back room, and he comes across a woman there. And she's full-on goth chick, and she's just like, oh, are you here to kill me? And he's just like, no, there are millions of lives at stake, but, like, I will do what I have to get the information I need. Where's Magnus? And she's just like, if there's millions of people at stake, I don't even care about that. All I care about you, me, in the moment. So kiss me. Impress me, and if you do, I will tell you what you need to know. If not, I'll cut your heart out with this dagger. And so Grayson does what he does best. He seduces, and she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no." He all he could talk about was politics and war or whatever. He knew that he was had this bigger plan in mind, and he's like, "Tell me where I can find the inoculation." And she tells him to get on his knees. And she's like, oh, yeah, he's the inoculation. He was the only one who would trust himself to be the vaccine. He's already at the airport. So at that point, Grayson just gets up and walks out. She tries throwing the dagger at him. And he just grabs it out of midair and says, thanks for the tip. So Grayson obviously passes that on to Batman at some point. But we see the CDC agent entering the plane, finds the body in the hold. It's obviously patient zero from how quickly it's decayed. And we see the other CDC agent there is Magnus, and he strips off his suit and he shoves the CDC agent sans mask into the cargo hold, and he's like, there, your goal was containment, there you go. But at this point, Batman shows up. He tries throwing some punches, but he is weak, he is tired, he is not doing good, and Magnus points that out. And he's like, oh, you're too old to put up much of a fight, Bats. And Batman's like, that's why I got these toys. And so he uses a taser on Magnus, manages to knock him out, takes out some of his blood, and is like, I'm sure that, he says, a psychopath with a conscience, I'm sure some people would say we've got the same blood. So we then get a one-page wrap-up. They managed to make a cure for it. Everyone who was sick is safe. Bruce is just knocked out to the point where Alfred's like, wow, you're actually asking for a vacation at this point. I've never thought I'd see the day. And he gets on his plane and flies away. And our last two panels are cutting to the security guard. Chief Bohr was his name, apparently. And he's like, hey, like, he got the blood transfusion, the virus is gone, but he's still not okay. He's still hooked up to a bunch of like lung machines and stuff like that. And he gets a gift, and it is tickets to Hawaii. So Bruce Wayne pulled through on him. So yeah, that's the two-parter. I gotta say, I really like these. I think art style-wise, John Paul Leon, fantastic art. It genuinely gives such a mood to it, whether it's the Grayson stuff in Belarus or it's the airport stuff. I cannot fault any of the art. And then writing-wise, yeah, it feels tense, but also it's got a succinctness to it. Like, it allows the art to breathe. That's the thing. A good writer knows when to let the art do the storytelling. So, all in all, very well done two-parter for this particular issue. It's a little bit below the first one, but not by much. I can't even remember the score I gave the first one, though, but I think this one's a solid 8. I think it's a very well done two-parter, and I would definitely highly suggest checking it out. Gotham Academy number 2, written by Becky, Cloonan, and Brandon Fletcher, art by Karl Kerschl. So, last issue was kind of just setting up the characters. It was a little bit of an exploration of the school, but for the most part, Olive has some sort of mysterious secret. We don't know what it is yet. So we open up with her reading through a school book of the diary of Millie Jane Cobblepot. It's a little bit of prose, but ultimately it ends up with the general vibe of, oh, the darkness is so welcoming. The darkness is my only true shelter. And Olive's like, same, bro. So all of a sudden she hears a little thud noise outside her room. She goes to check it out. And through the giant-ass windows of her hallway is the bat signal. And she's like, yeah, I'd welcome a little darkness too. And as she looks out the window, she sees a bunch of people running in seemingly bat costumes in the middle of the night across the grounds. And she's freaked out by that. But seems that she didn't get a lot of sleep, as did nobody in the school, because of ghosts. And they said there were like clangings through the halls and stuff like that. And we see Olive is falling asleep at her chair. Meanwhile, Heathcliff and her rival, bully, whatever you want to call her, Pommeline, are just making out at his desk. And Olive looks over and says it's gross, and Pommeline's like, what are you looking at, huh? So Olive then talks to Heathcliff, and he's just like, hey, what's going on? And he's just like, don't talk to her. He's like, well, she was my tutor. So then Pommeline comes over being like, hey, people talk and they say, like, what happened over summer break? I bet you're loving all this extra attention. And she's like, what are you talking about? So teacher comes in, and teacher's just like, hey, you two look like you're in a little bit of a spat. In order to make you better friends, I'm handing out group projects, and you guys have to do this thing on the history of Gotham. So you girls are going to learn a lot from each other. And neither of them look too happy about that. We cut over to lunch to some extent, and we see Olive is looking for a place to sit when she sees that Maps and Kyle, well, at least Maps is calling her over to sit next to Kyle, and she's like, I can't do that, and goes sits to some other kid who's just sketching in a notebook, and he's like, hey, can I take this seat? Kid freaks out, covers up the book. Olive accidentally spills a drink on it, and it turns out that there's a drawing of Maps that he was doing in there, and she's like, hey, are you drawing Maps? And at that point, Kyle comes over, just be like, hey, do you have a minute? Like, maybe we should talk a little bit. And I was like, oh, Kyle, I don't. And that's when Maps comes over and just like, hey, Olive, let's chat. Let's come over, sit. And she's like, I got to go do a project pretty soon. I'm like 5 minutes ago. I got to go. Sorry. And that's when Maps talks to the kid doing the sketchbook being like, hey, do you draw a lot? Can you draw my D&D characters? So we see Olive and Pommeline in the library, just like waiting for some books from the librarian. We see a Mr. Scarlet delivers this big, huge book on the industrial age of Gotham City, just like, yes, no, this will have everything that you girls need. And by the way, Olive, here's that other book you asked for. It would help on your quest to knowledge. And we see Pommeline's like, look, I'm not going to get the book. You go do it. And she's like, okay, whatever, fine. So she goes down deep into the library, and she's just like, man, I got to learn to stand up to Pommeline. She sucks. And as she gets out the book, she sees in the shelf behind is this boy who opens up his eyes, and they are black with red irises. And she's freaking out about that, but she makes her way back up to Pommeline, just like, oh, I don't know what it was. I don't know what's going on. And she's like, whatever, you're such a weirdo. Tell me what this book is. And turns out it's the Diary of Millie Jane Cobblepot again. It's just like, God, it's such a waste. We already have the books. Why did we have to get this one as well? But it turns out this version of the book has handwritten notes and maps and stuff in it. And Pommeline's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. All this time. Hold on, I got to text Heathcliff. And I was just like, what? What do you mean? And Pommeline just picks up the book, says, none of your business. I'm keeping this. Don't want to lose it. I'm out of here. And I was just like, come on, give me the book back. And she was like, oh, what, is this your favorite book? Oh, you know all about crazy Millie Jean, don't you? You and your mother. And Olive is caught so off guard that Pommeline's just able to leave. So we then cut to a science class, some sort of chemistry thing, and Olive is upset, just like, oh, what's wrong with me? I know I'm not crazy, but I got this giant blank spot of what happened over summer. I don't know what's going on. And this one kid, like, messes with her science project. She freaks out on the guy, like, says, why don't you just leave me alone? And then just storms out of class, needs to clear her head. She ends up going and watching Kyle playing tennis from under the bleachers, and she's just like, oh God, I miss him, but like, what would he do if he ever knew about? And then all of a sudden we see the teacher, the history teacher, is like smoking a cigarette while walking her dog, and she's like, oh, Olive, I didn't see you there. You didn't see this. Don't tell anybody about this. And she's like, oh no, I won't, don't worry about it. And they like bond for a minute. She shares about the boy troubles and whatnot. And she's like, oh, you didn't tell him yet, did you? And she's like, no. What would I even say? And she's like, well, just tell him how you feel and know that you're the same Olive underneath it all. He'll understand. She's like, am I though? And we see her dog actually goes digging and seemingly pulls out a full human femur from underneath a tree, and just nobody reacts to that. So later on, we see Olive is back in her room. Maps is there, and she's trying to see what these ghostly noises are in the walls. So she's got a hammer. She's about to put holes in it. And she's like, no. You got to go back to your own room. Let's get you out of here. But then all of a sudden, they hear noises outside again. And as they look down outside, they see the same hooded figures running around. And they realize, oh, they're going to the old cemetery. There was that map for the cemetery before. Like, we got to go. So Maps and her make their way out to the cemetery. They get all freaked out, but they see that the tomb of the Cobblepots, the Cobblepot crypt, is left open, and they hear chanting inside of it. So they slowly make their way inside, and as they go further and further down these steps, they see a candlelit room with 3 figures in it, all wearing bat costumes. Not like Batman, but actually like helmets shaped like bats. And as they're chanting this thing, Olive freaks out, just like, oh, bats, I can't do it, I can't. Maps is like, don't worry about it, I'll handle the mission, you just get out of here, I'm sure I can figure this out. And she's like, no, you keep watch, I'll do this. And so she slowly creeps out from cover, and she sees on their little mantle that they're chanting around is the book, the diary that was taken from the library. And they're like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. This is Pommeline. This is just, oh man, I'm so pissed off. And she can't bottle up her anger anymore. She just stands up and says, hey, this book doesn't belong to you. And in doing so, she accidentally kicks over some candles that start lighting up some curtains. The one that's obviously Pommeline is like, hey, get your hands off that. You're gonna ruin everything. And she's like, no, I don't think I will, and you don't know who you're dealing with, as fire just like swirls around her. And the final caption is, after all, I am my mother's daughter, as we see Pommeline and Heathcliff are unmasking themselves as they watch Olive. All right, we're setting up mysteries. Who's Olive's mother? What happened over the summer? What's so big about this cult thing? Why do they want this book? There's a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully we can deliver on everything. As for this particular issue, I mean, issue 1 was very much, hey, let's get to know the characters. Issue 2 is setting up the plot. So I'm looking forward to it. This is definitely a very interesting mystery-filled book, and I'm looking to see how we manage to wrap all that up by the end. So all in all, I'm going to say this one is... I'm going to give this one an 8. I really enjoy it. I think it's got a lot of potential to it. Will it live up to it? I don't know, but this has got me hyped. Grayson number 4, written by Tim Seeley and Tom King, art by Mikel, Janin. So this issue, I mean, last issue was just more of, yeah, spy stuff, whatever. I believe Agent 8 died, so there was a death on Grayson's conscience at this point. But this issue picks up inside of Mr. Minos's office. He's given a mission to Grayson and Bertinelli, and Grayson's just sucking on a lollipop like crazy, like making loud ass squicking noises, and Helena's getting more and more pissed off as this is going on. So eventually she just swats it out of his mouth with a single move, and Grayson's taken off guard. Minos meanwhile is saying, yeah, we had something fall into Checkmate's stuff, so you're gonna have to break into their base in order to get it, so go ahead. And so Grayson actually reaches down, picks up the lollipop at the end, being like, man, you got hair and stuff on it. That's gross. But you can only get these things when we're in Malaysia. So yeah, I'm going to be taking advantage of it. I'm going to eat the whole thing still. And as they're walking to the plane, Bertinelli's like, hey, Agent 8, if she was important to you, you can talk about it. And he's like, no, that's part of the job. I'm good. I got it now. Don't worry about it. So we just see the fallout from the mission. They're in paragliding suits. They got all this stuff, and whatever it is, they accomplish the mission. But then we cut back over to St. Hadrian's Finishing School, the female boarding school that trains assassins. And we meet a couple of girls named Bryce, Janny, there's one other one in here that I don't know what her name is, and Lottie. And they're just a couple of teenage girls that are just, enjoying the night, doing whatever. But Lottie comes in and she's like, hey, I got something good for you guys. You know how I've got little cameras and stuff set up everywhere? Well, I found this absolutely hunkin' beefcake who's been on the grounds. We haven't seen him around, but check this out. And of course, because he's wearing the Hypnos thing, you can't see his face, but it is Grayson just lounging about in his room shirtless, as he tends to do. And all the girls are like, okay, you know how boys do panty raids? We got to do a manty raid. We're going to go and we're going to get in this guy's room and we're just going to, pat ourselves on the back about it. So we see Grayson is looking at the clock. He rewires it to be able to communicate with Batman. And he's like, oh, bird watchers, Mr. Malone, did you get the lollipop? And he says, yeah, you did a great job. We got DNA from you and Miss Bertinelli off of it, along with a couple other things. But here's the deal. There was nothing from Mr. Minos except for a bunch of nanites. He has nanites in his room that literally go around and eat any of his dead skin cells or anything else that will hold his DNA. This is at a microscopic level of paranoia. I did not think he'd go this far. Are you, like, Grayson, are you sure you're going to be good about this, man? This might be a bit much. And we see that Batman Eternal's going on over in the background, and Batman's like, look, hey, we can talk about this later, but like, I gotta get going now, okay? Bye. So Grayson's like, yeah, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always figure it out. And then all of a sudden he hears the girls talking outside the room, and he's like, what's going on out there? So he jumps out, shirtless, of course, and he's like, oh, well, I'm gonna go find who's sneaking out in the dark there. Meanwhile, we cut to Dubai, where Midnighter is holding this dude up from the edge of a building, saying like, hey, according to my cutting edge brain, the heart went down somewhere here right in your backyard. You should know where it went to. And Apollo shows up and says, hey, he doesn't know. You know he doesn't know. Stop threatening the guy. Put him down. Come back to Stormwatch. And Midnighter's like, very poor choice of words, drops the dude off the building, and Apollo's like, you know I gotta go down and get him, right? And he's like, yep. And I know that by the time you get back up here, I'll be gone. And he's like, all right, whatever. So we then cut to the girls, who are out in the woods. They're all wearing masks and other gear and whatnot to hide their identities. And Nightwing's like, I had to fake my death, become a super spy, risk my life every day. There's mini robots that could easily eat my skin at any point, and I'm being chased by college girls. Nice. So we see him just jump right in front of them, and all the girls are like, oh my god, sexy Tarzan man, yes, please, I want you. And they're immediately like, okay, look, he saw us, but he's still running. He wants us to chase him. That's why he's not going to turn us in. So he just starts flying around. Meanwhile, Helena goes, and she is on special mission from Minos to find whoever is sending these encrypted messages in the middle of the night, aka the ones Nightwing is sending. And we see her enter into Grayson's room. She starts looking around. She's looking around for any sort of info she can. And she looks briefly at the alarm clock that he's been rewiring this whole time. We don't get any solution to that. We see the girls have climbed up on top of a cathedral. They're looking around for where Grayson is. He's on a clock tower the other side of campus. And just like, oh my god, he moves like one of the American superheroes. He's like a Batman's. And it's like, all right, well, look, we can cut across the greenhouse to get to him. So they start running, and Grayson's like, all right, let's see how much Bertinelli has taught you and how much she still needs to be schooled herself. So we actually get a map of the entirety of the finishing school. We see how the girls follow Grayson, and Grayson jumps one step ahead of them at all times. And by the time that they're all on the same roof there, they're like, hey, he's up here, we did it. But then they're immediately disappointed because standing behind him is Helena, who's like, all right, girls, go back to your room. Agent 37, you're with me. So they end up in Minos' room, and Minos is like, Agent 37, I thought we were cool. I thought that we had got a bit of trust here, but you have completely betrayed my trust. You have gone too far, and we are going to have to punish you with a torturous compromise because you clearly do not like your job here. And turns out what they're saying is that Grayson was never supposed to be seen. He was not supposed to be made aware of. But now that he has been seen, they are going to give him a new cover as a French former Olympic gymnast who has a super boring looking face and is absolutely gay. So none of the girls are going to be into him at all. And he's like, yep, and you're going to be teaching them 2 hours or 2 classes of acrobatics a week. So that's your thing now. You're part of the school. That'll be all. So sends Grayson away. Meanwhile, we see Minos turn to Bertinelli about her plan and just like, yes, I believe I found the source of the signals. And she pulls out a bunch of tiny cameras and microphones and says, this is Lottie's. Lottie Duff, she's been recording around the campus secretly. And Minos is like, very impressive. Give her extra credit. But also punish all the girls for being caught out afterward, or after curfew. Because we're totally cool with them breaking the rules if they are like interesting spycraft that like stumps even us. But being caught so easily is not something to be celebrated. So we then see Grayson, he wakes up. Helena's just standing over his bed. And she's like, hey, I know why you came to Spiral. I saw you jumping around on rooftops at night. You loved being Nightwing. You loved jumping around, owning the night, like all that sort of stuff. And now you don't think that you can do that anymore. And you're afraid you're going to lose who you are. And she walks over to the window and she's like, I don't want you to forget that. I want you to still have that piece. I want you to remember the night. So she jumps out, says, chase me. And Nightwing's like, hell yeah. So she jumps. He follows suit. And that's the issue. I mean, it's a beefcake issue. Dick's shirtless literally the entire time. But I think it does set up an interesting dynamic here of showing, yeah, Dick is still Dick. He is still someone who is going to have fun. And he's absolutely not taking this super seriously, but still knows how serious it is in the first place. So overall, I liked it. I think it's a very well done issue. It sets up a bit more of the school stuff, which is very interesting, and also where Minos is, not his allegiance, I don't know the word I'm looking for, his priorities lie. His idea of he's willing to go this far to protect his identity, but like with the girls being caught out, he's just like, whatever. So yeah, no, solid issue. I'm going to give this one, I'll give it a 7.5. I'm enjoying it. I'm liking it. It's a very solid series, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it. Action Comics number 36, written by Greg Pak, art by Aaron Kuder. So last issue was post all the weird Brainiac, whatever stuff, super doomed. But it ended with Lana being at her parents' grave, and then all of a sudden, zombies. So we open up here in Metropolis. It's been 2 months after the Brainiac attack. We see everybody's rebuilding, and Clark is there helping the rebuilding efforts, but he's doing it as Clark, not as Superman. So he's like, oh yeah, it feels great. But then all of a sudden I get this really weird feeling. And we cut back over to Lana with her zombie attack, but it turns out it's just a dream. And she wakes up in bed next to Steel and just like, oh God, it's been a whole freaking month. Oh God, I hate it so much. And Steele's just like, hey, it's okay. I'm here for you. Like, you got me out of the whole thing. So how about we get up? Let's get some breakfast. And she's like, oh yeah, I'll take some hotcakes. And she's like, oh, you're staring at my butt again? And she's like, yeah. So she gets up out of bed. She looks down the hall at her parents' empty bedroom, and she's hit by this pang of like upsetness, this little scream in the back of her head. And Steel, as they drive away from the farm, is like, hey, we don't have to stay in your parents' old house. Like, we can move anywhere. We've got plenty of money for that. Even another place in town. And she's like, no, I'm fine. It's fine. And so they make their way through town. Steel is still getting used to the small town vibes. He's like, oh, so everyone just waves whenever you go by? It's like, yep, that's Kansas. And they arrive at Steele's clinic, and there's a couple of people just waiting outside who are like, oh yeah, I got this problem with my knee, and like it's a whole thing. And they're like, oh, you've had that problem with your knee for years. That's not a new thing. And he's like, well, I'm mainly here to be looking for post-Brainiac stuff, but yeah, I'm willing to help out your knee or whatever. And as they're about to go inside, Lana looks down the street and just like, you guys see that fog? There's like a really heavy fog coming in, and all the old guys are like, oh yeah, that's weird. And all of a sudden, she sees like a hearse in one of them, and it's just like, hold on, something's going on. This is weird. This is like really close to my dream. So they hop into Steele's car. They go deeper into the fog. All of a sudden the phones go dead and all this stuff's going on. So they end up getting to where the hearse is going to. The sheriff's also there, and we see that the graves of the Lang family have been broken out of, seemingly from the inside. And Lana's like, this is my dream. Oh my God, this is exactly what's happening. And Steele's just like, calm down. And she's like, what do you mean calm down? This is literally, my parents just broke out of their graves. What the hell? And Superman, he knows something's wrong. He doesn't know why. He's just like, look, I know they don't need me. I know they got everything taken care of, but like, I'm just going to check in because something doesn't feel right. And as he arrives, he sees that all of Smallville is enveloped in this weird green mist. So he flies down into it. And then he pops out from the other side, 3 miles down the way. And he's like, okay, I can't get in, and it's teleporting me out. So he calls up the Toy Master, and he calls up Hero, and it's like, hey, look, my communicator's down. I can't reach the JLA. You're my next backup here. I'm outside Smallville. Can you look on some satellites or something? Tell me what I'm looking at here. And he's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. So he gets up, and he's like, well, I see Smallville where it's marked on a map, but like there is nothing there. Like, it is a void. Inside of the mist, we see the sheriff's calling out, seeing if he can get anybody. He can't find anybody around. But he does hear other people's like ghostly howls, and he's like, oh, I'm over here. God, I don't recognize the voice, but if it's anybody. Steel starts getting powered up. He calls out to Lana. They can't get a hold of each other. And then Lana hears a voice from behind calling her name, and she's like, oh, God. And we see it is the zombified corpses of her parents. And they're like, oh, it was so dark, and you didn't come. Where were you, Lana? Where were you, girl? And Lana's just like, every part of me is telling me that this is wrong, that I need to turn and run, and like I have never shied away from a fight, but this has broken through my limits of what I can deal with. And we see that behind the parents is this horrific looking corpse being that has them chained up with like tentacles and is the one who's actually doing their voices. So Superman goes up into space and he's like, hey man, you find anything to deal with the Smallville stuff? And it's just like, I mean, no, maybe, I'm working on it. And Superman just starts piling back down as fast as he can towards the mist. And he's like, look, I'm just going to hit it faster and harder until you give me something. He's like, well, hold on. It's got a pulse. It's got a beep, beep, bop, beep, beep, bop, beep, beep, bop. And he's like, okay, and? He's like, well, the bops are weaker. Try to time it to, like, if you push hard enough on the bop, you might be able to get in. And Superman does do so, but he recognizes it as a heartbeat, that this thing is alive, and he manages to get in through the mist. And the first thing he sees when he gets in is this horrific monster-looking thing holding up Lana's dead parents. And he's like, you know, usually I don't punch right away. Usually I try to ask them to back down, but like, I'm done. This is too far. And he starts beating the ever-loving crap out of this monster, just totally taking it down. And he's like, all right, that's enough. You're not going to hurt him anymore. And so he's out. We see him start to fade away into the mist, like teleport out. And he's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll find you. I will get you. And he looks around and he sees the sheriff is dead. The corpses of Lana's parents are laying right in front of her. And he's just like, okay, let me deal with this. So he loads up the corpses back into the hearse. He spends an eternity trying to think of what to say to Lana. And all he can come back with is, I am so sorry, but like I am here for you, and I promise you that I'm going to find out what's going on here. And Lana's like, you know, maybe stop making promises. Maybe stop doing that, because like you keep doing that and it keeps on not working out here. And I hate this, and I hate what's happening, and I know it's not your fault, but like, oh God, I'm not okay. You know, my parents have never died before, so maybe just give me some time here. And Clark calls back up to Toymaster, see what's going on. He's not able to connect through the mist, and Steel was just like, okay, well, all of our communications are down. There's nothing else we can do. And Clark turns to Lana and he's like, hey, look, you know how I promised I am going to stay here and I'm going to figure this out? I have to try to get out of here real quick just to be able to like deal with this. But I swear to you, I'm still working on it, and I promise I'm coming back. So he flies off and he immediately shows right back up again. Just like, well, that was fast. And he's like, ah, crap. No, it's a teleport thing again. All right, listen for the pulse. But now he can't hear the pulse. He's inside. He can't hear it anymore. So he just keeps flying faster and faster. And he's thinking to himself like, oh, you think you can stick me? Bro, I was in a black hole. I flew for like weeks to be able to get back home. You can't stop me, and you're not going to hurt my friends. So he keeps on just looping super fast, like streaks of Superman just in the sky. And we see the three old men sitting outside of Steel's clinic. It's just like, wow, it's a crazy day around here. Not every day you see something like this. But the old men basically say, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to face it. What are we going to do about Superman? And the other one says, well, the real question is, what is he going to do about all of us? And we see seemingly all the residents of Smallville are possessed by something. So yeah. I mean, it looks good. It's a well-written issue. I really like the characterization of Lana here. They spent a bunch of issues showing how absolutely fearless Lana is, and then they give her something that is just too much for her. And I think that only works because they spent all of those issues building up how fearless she was to give her something that truly does affect her this much. Add on top of that, Superman still got his bearded look, so it does feel like he's not truly back yet. No, I like all of this. I do think that it's a little bit cheap of, oh yeah, a zombie thing or whatever, but they could pull it out. I'm not saying this is beyond their capabilities of writing this to say that there's no way to make it an interesting examination of something by just using zombies. So overall, I'm thinking that this is a This is 7.5. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to the rest, and the art style is very good. Aquaman and the Others, number 7, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Medina. So last issue, it's basically just resetting up the team, getting back together, but ultimately at the end, the Operative was blindsided by KG Beast and another mysterious figure that's definitely not Cheshire, who is on the cover of the issue. So we open up this issue with Saya and the other Yawara are visiting Saya's family over in Tehran, when all of a sudden Saya gets a vision of operatives almost being like killed by prisoner of war. And it's just like, okay, we gotta go. It teleports out of here. Something else is going on. So then we cut over to Operative, who is thrown off a building by KG Beast. He doesn't have any backup plans. He's going to splat when all of a sudden the Vostok clone and or original has heard the comms, heard that there was gunfire or whatnot, and so he came over here to help out Operative, brings him back up to the roof, and then KG Beast is still there firing. And Operative mentions like, oh no, watch out, it's KG Beast. And Vostok is like, what? KG Beast is here? He is great hero in my country. And Operative's like, okay, we need a little bit of an update there, buddy. So KG Beast is attacked by Vostok, is immediately fought back upon because he's just like, oh, maybe you're not the original Vostok. I don't think you're the Omega. You must be one of the others. So you and I should have a talk sometimes. And we see him throw some like exploding stars of Vostok that end up going off. So at that point, I'll be honest, the art does not do any favors here. For some reason, KG Beast is now on his ass and Vostok has his gun. Or at least it seems that way. And then KG Beast is back up against Vostok again. So it's a whole fight scene going on, just say that much. But as Operative tries to join into the fight, all of a sudden, he is tossed into a battle with Cheshire. And Operative's like, who the hell is this? Oh god, it's her. If this is, KG Beast was a problem before, this is the most dangerous woman in the world. And because of KG Beast having his son in America, which I knew nothing about, but I would have expected him. But her, nah, this is out of hand. I got to try to even the playing field. So he throws a smoke grenade, and then all of a sudden, Aquaman shows up, jumping out of a helicopter, smashes KG Beast's hand with his trident, and it's the, weapon hand. And he's like, oh, whatever, I can kill you with my bare hand. And that's where Cheshire intervenes and just like, no, our mission's a success. We have the flash drive. We got to get out of here. So they go to the edge of the building. It looks like they're waiting for a helicopter. Aquaman's like, oh, if there's a chopper, don't let it land. Don't let them get to it. But then all of a sudden, this strange wind starts blowing Vostok Operative and Aquaman all around. And it manages to lift up Cheshire and KG Beast and seemingly allows them to disappear. And they say, oh, she was talking to someone called Maelstrom, because that was what they said over the comms. So some kind of elemental or something, but we couldn't see her. So at that point, Mara gets out of the copter. She was the one who was flying. Just like, hey, who are those people? And we get the lowdown on KG Beast, how they both Operative and Vostok have connections to him. And Vostok's not sure what the connections are, but he knows they're there. And then he's like, yeah, and also Cheshire, there's a history there as well. Don't worry, we fought a time or two. And Mara's just like, these people have so many secrets, Aquaman. Why do you trust them so much? But Operative's just like, look, this is part of a larger group. If both of them are involved, this is a group called Mayhem. It's a small group, but they are super dangerous, so we got to watch out for that. Then we go over to the prisoner of war story. Remember, he was going with the grandson of Operative to one of his spirit's families and basically said, hey, you were told that they died a very specific way of a car accident. Turns out that wasn't the case. And we get the full story as they were in Berlin when all of a sudden there was a terrorist attack. They didn't have their guns or anything like that. They were on like shore leave, and they saw KG Beast escaping with some briefcase, and they knew it was an issue. They knew it was something of they should stop it, so they try to fight against Beast. Prisoner is knocked onto his back and is unable to join in the fight. Meanwhile, KG Beast is exchanging shots with some shadowy figure up on the roof, and in the middle of the crossfire, Prisoner of War's managed to escape, but the other guy, whose name I'm not entirely sure of, he was the one who ended up taking the bullet. So that's... Oh, Gary. Sorry, Gary ended up getting shot. So that's the way he actually died. And the family member that they're talking to is like, but why did the army tell me it was hit by a car? And also, your voice kind of sounds like Gary's, and your face kind of looks like it too. What's going on there? He's like, I carry all the souls of the men with me. Whenever I come back to one of their families, it kind of bubbles up to the surface. Gary is in here. He's the one sharing this with you. I'm so sorry this happened. And she's like, well, this is deeply upsetting, but also very gratifying. Thank you for showing up. So they start making their way back over to the copter when all of a sudden Gary starts getting pissed off. He's just like, oh, you gotta do something. And we don't hear what Gary's saying, but we do see Prisoner reacting like, no, Gary, you're wrong. It can't be. No, I don't believe it. And then we cut over to the moon. If you remember, Vostok's clone's base was on the moon. It has now been taken over by Mayhem. We meet a few other members of the team, such as Braze, Stranglehold, and there's one other one they gave a name to, NKV Demon, which is right up there with KG Beast. So basically saying like, yeah, no, they're never going to think to look for us on this base, and even if they do, we can totally fight them. In fact, let's go fight them right now. Let's go. We should totally kick all their asses. And Cheshire's like, no. Look, we've got the flash drive. We can do anything we want now. And they plug in the flash drive, and it turns out this flash drive is the nuclear launch codes to an old forgotten Soviet satellite that has 12 nukes on it. And they say, yep, we can use this to do whatever we want and reshape the world as we see fit. So back over to the copter, prisoner of war, whatever the other guy's name is basically threatening the grandson, being like, you're his grandson, we should kill you in response for this. And he's like, whoa, hey, what did I ever do here? And prisoner of war is trying to fight it off. Meanwhile, Yawar and Saya show up and just like, hey, yeah, Aaron, back off, man. This isn't him. This is one of the souls trying to take control. It's one bubbling up to the surface. And Saya talks to the soul and just like, oh, it was him. He did this to me. And she's like, no. I've seen your memory. I know what you're talking about. Your killer was not KG Beast. The one you were shot by was the operative. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so the operative, Gary got caught in the firefight. The operative ended up actually shooting him, and I'm sure that there's some level of guilt and apologies that need to be made there. NKV Demon, that is such a bad name. I don't know if that's sort of a character they're pulling back. I'm sure it is, but like, it's such a bad name. Overall, it's not a horrible issue. I did see the turn the moment that like, because they showed the flashback of KG Beast fighting, like the page after it said operative, it's like, yeah, we fought a few times before. It's like, oh yeah, did you? Did you really? Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad issue. It's just not a lot happens. I mean, it seems like a lot happens. It seems like it's a big whole huge thing, but like ultimately it feels so weightless in a lot of ways. Like, you know that they're not actually going to drop nukes, or if they are, it's going to be controlled. They went a bit too big with that threat. And then when it comes to the operative being the one who shot Gary, like, we all know this is just going to end up with him being like, and I'm so sorry. If they pivot that, great, cool, but it doesn't feel like they will. So all in all, I'd say this one's probably like 6.5 for me. I don't know. I just wasn't getting anything out of it. It hasn't... Honestly, this book has never done anything to really draw me into it, to really get me intrigued in the others. But now you're introducing an enemy team that seems equally as like, really? This is your group? Stranglehold? All right. So yeah, I'll give it a 6.5, but ultimately I'm not that impressed. Earth 2, number 28, written by Tom Taylor and Marguerite Bennett. Marguerite Bennett writing most of the story. And then, like, I don't know, 17 different artists. So, I was kind of upset last issue because it felt like Earth 2 was becoming the supplementary material to the Earth 2 World's End. Like, that was the primary. This is the backup. That has all but been confirmed with this issue. Because this issue is, hey... Remember how we introduced those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? Wouldn't you like to know where they came from? Wouldn't you like their origin stories? So here we go. We open up on Zarnia. which is the home planet of Lobo. We meet up with the Zarnian, who does not have a name, but she says, Zarnia is a paradise if you live in the upper echelon, but for us down here on the lower half, it's absolute hell. And she's trying to sell like some scrap metal or whatnot, and she comes across Lobo, who's bringing in a giant animal carcass and basically saying like, hey, yeah, there's this sickness going around. It's absolutely awful. Are you sick? And she's like, oh, I don't feel sick, but my parents definitely have it. And he's like, well, we'll do what we can. We'll ultimately try to survive, but ultimately it's going to be up to the gods. And she's like, yeah, okay, the gods. It's ultimately going to be up to like whether or not we're able to be in the upper life or the lower life. So at that point, we see that night her parents start coughing, wheezing. They got pustules on them or whatnot. And the woman makes the decision, all right, I'm going to go get medicine. And echoing Lobo's words earlier, if you want something, then you just need to take it. So she goes into the House of Healing, like a temple, and she goes in and she finds some medicine, but she is immediately jumped by some guards. And she's thrown into a cell and just like, oh, you're all these crimes against you, blah, blah, blah. And we see 6 days pass, and apparently the guards who brought her in are choking on their own vomit, and they've got pustules and stuff like that. 10 days later, she's being kicked by a guard. 15 days later, she's still in her cell. And she gets a note from Lobo saying, hey, your mother and father passed away today. I'm so sorry. And we then see a woman step into her cell saying, hey, so we figured you out. You are a carrier. You have this disease in you, but ultimately you are not able to be, like, you don't have the symptoms. You're just your own thing. You are immune to it. And she says, I'm immune too. However, you're the one who's spreading it like wildfire. All of your guards have died, as have their families. Like, here's what we want from you. We are willing to let you out of here and let you go back to your parents. They will be spared. However, we're going to load you up with more diseases, and you're going to go to Apocalypse and go after Darkseid, because they mentioned earlier on, Apocalypse is coming to their planet. And she's like, I know you're lying. I know my parents are dead, but whatever. You know what? Sure. Agreed. So she gets loaded up with diseases. It's absolutely crazy. She's sweating. She's puking. She's a time bomb. But they send her as a diplomat over to Apocalypse. And so she barely manages to stumble off of the ship. Desaad is there waiting for her. Just like, oh, Madam Ambassador, what would you like to say? And then she just starts like exploding with disease all over the place. And Desaad's like, oh my god, I never thought, like, I thought this would happen eventually. I'm already immune to every disease ever, but like, this is great to see. This is truly fantastic. So what, you're going to show up here, you're going to murder all of us in the name of Zarnia? You do understand that, like, your entire people are being killed by your upper caste. Like, are you really going to let that stand? Like, you can instead come to Apocalypse, and we will treat you as, and give you the power to, like, kill all of the people who have wronged you. So which are you going to choose, Zarnia or Darkseid? And she's just like, oh, well, yeah, I choose Darkseid. Just, I'm sorry, Lobo, but make them suffer. So she becomes the Fury of Pestilence. We then go to Warworld, where we meet up with a huge hulking brute of a woman fighter who Mongol is pimping out to Steppenwolf, basically just saying, like, look how amazing. She's ripping them apart and eating their guts. And, like, Warworld goes around, they prey on the weak, but, like, she is top tier level. She's the best of the best. Everyone on the planet worships her because of how good of a champion she is. So, isn't she awesome? And I own her. And we see a banquet later on, and Mongol's still just basically like, seriously, man, I've got her so well trained. She's fantastic. She's great or whatever. And she's just like, oh, yeah, like, I'm totally happy to be in your pack, Lord Mongol. It's totally cool. And Steppenwolf's just like, yes. Hey, Mongol, what do you think of death? And he's like, what? On my planet, death is nothing. I can kill people all day. It doesn't even matter. And he turns to the fighter and is just like, what about you? What do you think of death? He's like, death is everything. Like, it's the last moment. Like, I have all this power. I can do all this stuff, but all of it ends the moment that they die. Death would be the end of all of that. And he's like, oh, but are you afraid to die? You go out there and fight? Like, all it would take is one bad match and you'd be gone. Like, you would lose everything all over again. But if you came and fight for Darkseid, you would never die. Like, the fury of famine would live forever. And Mongol's like, hey, no, you're mine. You can't do that. And he's just like, famine just stands up being like, and who's going to stop me? And immediately goes after Mongol, manages to actually make him bleed. And Steppenwolf's like, all right, cool, great. I'm going to take your prize dog here, and I'm going to turn it into the Fury of Famine for Darkseid. So then we go to Apocalypse, where one day, all of a sudden, a giant-ass meteor comes pummeling through, and Barda's looking up there, seeing that, and through the meteor, through all the chaos it's caused, out stops a small Tamaranian child. And we see that she is inducted into being trained a few weeks later to become the Furies for Darkseid, and one of them may be able to become one of the grandest rank of the 4 Furies. So we see the young girl is fighting, and she ends up impaling one of her sparring partners with a spear, and she's like, oh, it was an accident, I swear, we just slipped. But then she turns to another like friend of her named Ayla, and just like, hush now, Ayla, it wasn't an accident, tee-hee. So we see them continue to train together, Ayla and this Tamaranian, and they are neck and neck, they're doing great together, and Barda's like, oh, no matter how fierce you are, Ayla knows that you will not hurt her. And ultimately, they both come before Darkseid, and the little Tamaranian girl is like, okay, hey, Darkseid. And she turns to Ayla, and then just slits Ayla's throat and starts stabbing her mercilessly. And she's like, oh, mighty Darkseid, I did this because I loved them. And if I am to be a Fury, I only must love you. And so Desaad, who's standing beside Darkseid, is just like, well, I think she's the Fury of War. I think that pretty much solves that one. And then finally, we have Mars from Earth 2's universe. There was a mother of a young child. This is all narrated by the child. And the mother was totally peaceful, totally like hated to see any pain becoming anyone. But then all of a sudden, Apocalypse came to Mars and caused untold death and chaos and pain that even she was unable to heal. And everyone died, and everything was awful, and everyone was pillaged, and it was literally the worst time ever. However, she grieved more than most because of the loss of her child, and so Darkseid sensed that and ordered her to come before Darkseid. And so they did, and they made her into a joke. Like, they were just making fun of her and just like, oh, you are not dying, you are starved and all that stuff, but you do not die. And she responds with, oh, my child is dead. And Darkseid says, all right, here's the deal. Join me, I will give you another child, a child of power, someone so terrible it will be the death of all worlds, and you will be its mother. And she apparently had such joy with her first child and such grief that she lost it, that she said, okay. And she starts making out with Darkseid, and it turns out that whatever child this Martian ends up having, it will be the, she becomes the greatest Fury of death, but the child she has is Darkseid's, which will ultimately become the greatest weapon of all. So, there you go. The 4 Furies, how they came to be. Didn't ask for it. They're interesting stories in their own right. It's nice to see little tweaks on the DC mythology. You got a Tamaranian, a Zarnian, all this other stuff. But, I just don't like that this book is now the supplemental material. You know? I much would have preferred that this book just continue on with what it's doing and work with the World's End book to have a co-working narrative here instead of this now just being and also this is happening. So yeah, I'm a bit disappointed by that. Overall, I can't give this one above a 7 because of it, no matter how good the stories are, but I'm going to say this is still at least a 6.5. It's interesting stories. I think the weakest one is the death one, but that's more so just because we don't get to know much about her. Everyone else, we get a little bit more. That one was just kind of there. So yeah, 6.5. Hopefully this book can get some more plot to it at some point. Green Arrow number 36, written by Andrew Kreisberg and Ben Sokolowski, art by Daniel Sempier. So last issue, whole new status quo. The rest of the supporting cast is gone. We just got Diggle on the team. He's Oliver's dating his CEO. We have Mia Deirdre is being hunted down by some guy, and the final page reveal was Felicity Smoke is now around. So we open up in the rain. We're following Mia and her boyfriend, Trevor. Friend, maybe? I don't know. Apparently they just stole $50 from someone on the street, and it's just oh yeah, well, we're invisible on these streets, so we shouldn't have to worry too much. But apparently not invisible enough, as they are immediately greeted by 3 men in suits saying, "Mira Deirdre, no more running." And she grabs hold of Trevor and says, "Oh, you can have him." And he gets tased as she runs down an alleyway. She does a couple of like weird acrobatic flips that gain her absolutely no distance. And then all of a sudden at the end of the alleyway is a man with a gun who starts firing and shoots the 3 men in suits. And she's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I can get you somewhere safe. I knew your mother. Come with me if you want to live." So we then cut over to Oliver and Felicity. And Felicity's like, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't kill me because I'm not doing what I was hired to do. Like, I could have led you into the warehouse that was full of muscles and guns, but ultimately I didn't want to do that because I don't like murdering heroes, and that's not something I want to do anyway." And he's like, "You talk a lot." And yes, that does not stop. She's like, "Hey, yeah, you know, I've done many questionable things in my life, but like, I promise you, I didn't know that you were the target when this happened." And she says that she was contacted through World of Warcraft because she's the best hacker ever. And she's got such a large fee that she knew this guy was up for it. And she's like, "Oh, by the way, like, you can take off the hoodie. I know you're Oliver Queen." And then pulls up all the files saying like, "Yeah, I know your shoe size. I know you got a half-sister named Emiko. I know you had a much cooler supporting cast in the Jeff Lemire run, and they're all off the table now. And I know you're dating your CFO." And Diggle, who's on the line, is like, "You're dating Zara?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay, look, shut up. What's in this for you?" He's like, "Oh, I want to help you save the city. I've been... the biggest deal that's never crossed your radar, but I'm having a quarter-life crisis, so I want to be able to use my hacking stuff for good. For instance, I don't know the man who hired me, but he or she is very clearly high up the chain, and from my contact, there are only 2 people who can stop him. You, me, and some random girl named Mia Deirdre. Actually, that's 3. Sorry, I don't know how to count." And apparently, like, he's never heard of Mia, she's never heard of Mia, but she knows that this Mia girl is some sort of like chosen one, someone who's going to be able to help them out. And she asks, "Oh, do you know who might want you dead? Like, we'd skip the Mia thing if you know that." And Green Arrow's like, "I got a few names on a list I could think of, so not really that helpful." Meanwhile, we cut over to the dude who was looking for me in the last issue. He's got a hammer. He's swatting down. It looks super violent, but turns out he's building community housing. And there's a bunch of people nearby who are asking questions about, like, "Are you running for mayor? How much of your own wealth are you spending on these houses? Did you have dinner with Carmine Falcone?" And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Everyone, calm down. I'll let you know my political stuff by the end of the week, but I gotta go now." And he steps off into a car and he's like, "Hey, that guy who asked about Carmine Falcone, can we shoot him? Can we just get that over with?" And it's like, "Yeah, totally. No, we'll do it." So then one of his goons come up and says, "Hey, by the way, Mia Deirdre got away, so that's a bummer. But also, the hacker that we hired to take out Green Arrow, she betrayed us, and she's now off the grid as well." And he's like, "All right, well, hire the guy that I told you to hire in the first place to finish the job on both of them." So we then go to a rooftop where immediately he's like, "Felicity, this is John Diggle. I'm sure you already know about him." And she's like, "Yes, I do. You have a scar on your right butt cheek." And he's like, "I'm sorry, it took you over a year to let me in on your Green Arrow secret, but Blondie here flashes her eyelashes and you're just going to let her in?" And she's like, "Actually, I'm not a natural blonde, but yeah, no, by the way, hey, Oliver, you're on Justice League. Is Cyborg single?" And then he's like, "I'm on Justice League United, totally different thing." Anyway, he asks if she has a plan. She says no, or at least I didn't 40 seconds ago, but now I'm almost done hacking into this cryptologist, blah, blah, blah. Basically, she says, "Yeah, I got a name. His name is Garrett Diamond, and we can go get him." And then they get to his apartment, and Gilligan cut. Turns out he's already been shot dead by an arrow. So he's been dead for less than an hour. But Felicity's like, "Well, he left his computer on, so that's good news." So she hacks into his computer. Diggle and Oliver are like, "Oh my God, what in the hell is this girl doing?" And as they hack into the computer, they see Mia's face on the hard drive. So at that point, Oliver goes around just like, "All right," just asking random people on the street, "You know this girl? You know what's up?" And they pass this one kid some money saying like, "Oh yeah, haven't seen her." And Oliver's just like, "Yeah, all right, get out of here. You take the money, whatever." So they say something about the Queen Foundation taking in troubled youth or whatever, but then like, apparently it's not doing it. And he's like, "Yeah, look, there's so many kids on the street that have fallen through the cracks, the whole city, and nobody cares about them." And Felicity, who's watching through the cameras, is like, "Hey, I've got her on camera. I know where she is." So we see she's in a car driving with this mystery man, and he's like, okay, so you knew my mom? And he's like, yeah, no, I did some work with your family. That was a lifetime ago. And I got to say, I don't think she'd approve of you stealing from off the streets. And she's like, oh, well, it's better than the alternative of being dead, so she can disapprove all she wants. So basically says if she went legit, a guy named King would track her down in a nanosecond, and she's unable to go to the authorities because, like, that'd be testifying against the billionaire. There's no way that they believe her. But then all of a sudden, they're run off the road by, I'm assuming, King's men. They get out, they're ready to attack. They brought more than a stun gun, and that's when Oliver shows up. He starts firing arrows, they start firing guns. He manages to knock out all the guys, but before they are able to fully do anything, one of the guys manages to grab Mia, put her into the trunk of the car, and start driving away. Oliver takes out the tire, knocks one of the lights out. The car careens off the edge of a bridge, and Oliver is able to just barely get an arrow grappling hook around her to save her life. So she's like, oh my god, that was the coolest thing ever. You're the greatest, Green Arrow. Thank you so much. So then the guy who was helping out Mia gets out of the car and says, hey, Mia, I can help put King away. Your mother got evidence on him. We got to stop him. And before he can finish that sentence, he gets shot in the chest by an arrow. And it looks like Merlin, but like a dude with the burned side of his face saying, who wants to die next? And a Green Arrow kind of motif going on. So, yeah, look, I'm still just salty about the fact that we lost Lemire and Sorrentino. I liked the previous cast a lot more than I like Felicity. I'm upset, okay? I'm just upset. So, trying to be objective here about this issue, Mia's an interesting new character. She's obviously got something going on. They haven't really done the little street rat thing yet, so that's a perfect opportunity for this Green Arrow to handle, because I feel like that would have been Arsenal's story prior to the fact that he didn't have a origin story in the New 52. I'm upset about the other stuff. So I'm going to say this is a 6. Like, what do you want me to say? Yeah, no, I'm biased. If the previous, 20 issues before this didn't exist, I would absolutely give this a higher score. But you knew what you were starting, and you did it anyway. 6. Justice League 3000 number 11, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Howard Porter. So last issue, the Justice League managed to take down the 5, and they were just generally successful in everything that they needed to do. So we pick up sometime later on Cadmus World, where Boy Terry's walking back through the portal, and he is upset, and he is missing out on Locust and Callie. They are not with him. We see Convert is around. He's taken over another body. He's like, hey man, let me build up an army. We'll go back and we'll smash him. And he's like, no, just let me just go plan in my room. He's like, do you mean sulk? It's like, no, I don't mean sulk. I mean plan. Shut up. So he goes into his room and he's talking to a robot servant named Ronald, who's basically saying like, oh, I'm designed to look after you and your sister, and I'm here to help you through this. And Boy Terry gets so pissed off, like, she humiliated me. She's dead. She should be dead. Like, oh god, she's awful. And Ronald's like, oh well, she let you go, so that's nice of her. And then Terry reveals the details of the plan, which was back on Camelot 9, Aerial Masters, they had all the rest of the group locked up, and they were like, look, Boy Terry, we'll let you go if you undo the nanominds inside of the heads of all the different heroes, because they are genetically locked to you. And he's like, you think you have control, but the Convert's still out there. He'll help me. And Ariel's like, okay, so that's a no, because I'm just going to leave you in here and then bye. And he's like, well, hold up. So my sister, she said that she cares about me, and that's the only reason I'm alive. But, I think that she's just jealous of me because I'm super smart and she's not, and she's always looked up to me and she's been jealous. And Ariel's like, okay, I'm leaving now, bye. And he's like, what? Fine, I'll do it. God damn it, Jesus. So he breaks down a little bit. We cut over to Camelot 9, where we see Locust, Kali, and one of the bodies of Convert are locked inside of a basic, like a stasis field. And there's some ancient magic runes going around the side that Lancelot talks about, saying like, oh yeah, no, nobody's going to be able to break out this. Plus, Coeval is also embedded inside the runes, so he's also stuck in there as well. So all that's left are whatever single body of converts float around, and then Boy Terry. So Lancelot hops onto a flying robot horse, and the Justice League is like, boy, that guy's stupid. He looks so dumb on his robot horse. And they all start making their way through Camelot 9, and apparently they've got this huge-ass prison system around here that's all, like, domes and such like that nobody can escape from. So back on Cadmus, Convert's talking to Terry, basically saying, hey, when Ariel left, she corrupted the remaining DNA samples of the Justice League, so there is no way that we can make new ones. And he's like, okay, yeah, of course, why not? Sure. Just ruin my day a bit more. Did she ruin all the DNA samples? And he's like, no, just the Justice League ones. We've got quite a few left over from other people. And he's like, all right, well then, I think it's time we make a league of our own. So then we cut over to Ariel, who's chilling out in the Camelot world, and Bruce, outside of his Batman outfit, comes up and just like, hey, Ariel, just wanted to talk. I've been feeling a little bit restless, you know? And she's like, oh, yeah, sure. What's everyone else up to? And I was like, oh, Wonder Woman's going off and fighting demons. Superman is training Flash on how to be a superhero. Green Lantern's reading some history books. And she's like, oh, well, what about you? He's like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just restless. Like, woke up in this crazy universe, and I feel like I haven't had a chance to get my bearings. And Ariel's like, yeah, you know, I've been thinking about that. If we're going to keep going with this team, the Justice League and whatnot, this seems like a pretty good place to set up shop. And he's like, what, us? Like, collectively, the team? is just like, yeah, sure, totally. Like, we're going to have to get King Arthur's permission, but, like, check out my immediate first choice. And we see this giant-ass palace castle thing that is going to be the Justice League headquarters. So we cut back over to Cadmus, and there's a woman being dragged in, pleading for her life, saying, oh no, please, I would never have signed those papers if I knew that you would do this to me. And Terry's like, well, we also gave you a boatload of money, a new house, and we give a vaccine to your sick child. So would you give up all that too? And she's like, I can pay you back. And he's like, no, you can't. We're going to send you off to do some genetic testing now. Bye-bye. So then we cut back to Camelot, where Flash is racing with Superman. Flash just completely outclasses. Like, she finishes the race, and she's like, Superman, where you at? And then Superman runs up. He's like, oh, just give you. Oh, my God. And then Green Lantern comes down just being like, Superman, Flash is faster than you. You got to admit that. And also, Flash, Barry Allen was a super awesome dude. You need to understand that the mantle you now hold is bigger than just being a superhero. It's live up to Barry's ideal, all right? So we then see what all of the DNA testing and all the new stuff that Cadmus and Terry have been up to. Him and Convert walk into a room, and we get introduced to the new Injustice League. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. We've got Bane, Mirror Master, Sinestro, Zeus, and Lois Lane. All of them have had their powers augmented, except for Lois Lane. She just says, when those DNA splices kick in, then that's all we get. So, sure, Lois Lane. So he's basically just like, all right, look, we're going to go kill the Justice League, except for the Flash, you leave her to me. And Mirror Master's like, I'm sorry, Flash is a girl now? It's like, yeah, long story. Point being, we're going to take control of the universe, and we'll do whatever we see fit with it. Then we go to Takron Galtos, which is, of course, just Earth in the future. It's a prison planet. And there's some construction workers who are working on making some whatever. He's like toxic gunk or whatever. And all of a sudden, one of the guys gets called over saying, hey, excavation crew found something. It's an old cryopod. We want to check this out. And it's like, cryopod? Nobody uses cryopods. That was stupid technology. And it's like, yeah, well, we found one, and it's too old to even be ID'd. So we got to check it out. So they go over to the cryopod, and the person who found it's just like, yeah, data chips burned out a while ago. We got no info. We should leave it closed. And the one guy's just like, nah, screw that. Pop it open. I want to see what's inside. And the person who found it's like, all right, fine, whatever. Your head's on this one. And so they crack it open, and they're like, okay, just one question. Who the hell are these guys? And we get introduced to Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle being Ted. Keith Giffin's writing the book. Yeah, that makes sense. It absolutely makes sense that these two would be showing up here. No, I don't know what to make of this current direction. Obviously, we've got a whole thing with the Justice League, and then we've got like arch rivals in the future now. I'm cool with that. I think it makes sense for the next arc of the book. We had a different 5 new villains. They were all taken care of, and now we've got other people, a new Injustice gang. So I'm down with like the direction of the book. It's just the weird Blue Beetle Booster Gold thing at the end. If they're going to join the team, cool, great. I think that could work. But like, I've done a little bit of flipping ahead. It doesn't look like they do. It looks like they just go about their own thing for a while, and then we just cut between them and the Justice League. So that's a bit concerning, but regardless, I'll check it out. As for this issue, 6.5. Not doing anything great for me, but it also kind of just feels like an in-between issue. So what you gonna do? Lobo number 2, written by Cullen Bunn, art by Riley Brown. So last issue, and the conceit of the entire book is that Lobo has been hired to take out a bunch of assassins that were hired to take out Earth, and they've all got doomsday devices or whatever. So this issue we open up with the Grunt brothers, who apparently are in some subterranean caves on this planet. And Lobo's familiar with them, and he's just like, I really used to look up to these guys, but like, now that I actually see them, they're kind of stupid and dumb. So I live by a code, and my code says when I murder somebody, I look them in the eyes. And these guys, they're using a doomsday weapon. They don't have a code. Screw them. So Lobo jumps down, immediately starts slashing, dicing them all up. It's absolutely no problem for him whatsoever. And he's like, yeah, that's what separates a professional from the godless meat of the universe. So he picks up the doomsday weapon, whatever it was. He says, you might have brought the rain, but I brought the thunder. And then he starts making his way up through the subterranean tunnels. And he's like, yeah, you know, technically this was 3 instead of just 1 guy. So I got played for a bit of a rube there. But regardless, I have to fulfill my contract. And he says how much he hates Earth because he crawls out of these ancient tunnels that have like all these ancient cave paintings on them up into a porta potty and crawls out of it that way. And he's like, these Earthers, they don't know what they got here. So we see he's at an amusement park, and he's like, all right, whatever. I can understand why people want to blow up the Earth, but I gotta save it because that's what my thing is. And so he makes his way out to the parking lot. He reaches his weird wheel bike thing, and there's 3 people sitting on it, and he's like, all right, all of you off, I don't care who you are. And they're like, you got us wrong. One of them looks straight up like Dr. Eggman, like Dr. Eggman if he was in a Hellraiser movie. And he's like, hey, yeah, my name's Rave, that's Luna, that's Emily, we're your partners now. And Lobo's like, no, you're not. I got Dr. Eggman, some weird cowboy lady, and a teenager. No thank you. And so he shoves them all aside, just being like, oh, well, Riala, the woman who hired you, says that you could use a little bit of help. So thought we'd give you some local talent. And hey, man, we got the intel. We know where to find the targets from here on out. So we're going to split the score, you know? And Lobo's just like, dude, don't push me. I am not about this at all. So then we get a flashback to Zarnia where we see Lobo is training some sort of honor guard or something like that to protect the king, the Lord Emperor. And he looks over and he sees the Emperor's daughter, who obviously he's got a thing with. And he walks over to him just like, oh, did you come here to watch the men work up a sweat before they leave? But the princess is all upset and she's like, oh, my father, he's acting strangely. Something's troubling him, but he won't say what. I don't think I could stand if something happens to him. And Lobo's like, nothing's going to happen. I have pledged my soul to defend your father. Clearly that works out well. So we cut back to the group who have flown to Shanghai now for the next one. And they realize, okay, you know, it's a big, massive population center, so it might be a little bit hard to find them. But immediately Lobo's just like, I got this. It's like, all you guys just back up, sit down, whatever. Like, I don't need any of you guys. And he looks at the teenage girl and just like, seriously, like, you're like 4. What could you possibly do? And she's like, hey, I'm 14 and I've killed a bunch of guys. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Point being, I've got a lock on the target, so we're here. And Rave is immediately like, all right, guys, let's get a rundown. Let's figure out the plan. And before he can even finish his sentence, Lobo's already off the ship, jumped down. He's talking to him on comms, just basically saying like, hey, yeah, you guys stay up there. I'm going to take care of this. And think of yourselves as the backup squad. And don't touch anything. Go in radio silent. And so he walks into this building. There's a bunch of people in floating tubes of whatever liquid, some sort of bioengineering thing, and he comes across a robot that's draped in human skin. And he's like, all right, this is clearly the bad guy. He's got his finger on the doomsday button. So he just says, hey, you, shoots him in the head and calls it quits. But then the rest of the crew comes in, and he's like, I told you guys to stay. All right, whatever, fine, you're here. And so he goes over to where this guy has a bunch of vials of stuff stored up, and he's like, yeah, no, this is just advanced biotech that he was going to use to do something. And I think it's Luna is like, you don't even know what this stuff does, do you? He's like, it just doesn't matter. It's a doomsday thing. That's all I need to know. And she goes over and she points out on the monitor saying like, hey, this is a simulation of some sort. It's like a contagion or a disease thing. It's a biological attack. He was going to launch these viruses. And in fact, according to this, he already kind of did. And we see zombies roaming the streets of Shanghai. So Lobo has to go out and start taking care of them. He starts slicing all of them up, doing what he has to. One of them goes full Resident Evil, like Nemesis sort of thing, and like his neck like extends and detaches from the rest of his body, so he has like an extendable spine. So Lobo is biting off a little more than he can chew there, when all of a sudden he sees the rest of the crew have taken up the plane overhead, and they start firing down shots to clear out the zombie horde. They almost shoot Lobo, and he's like, friendly fire, I guess, but I owe Riala for setting me up with this crew one way or another. So they end up killing all the zombies, taking care of all of them. And Rave's like, hey, see, we did a good job. And Lobo points out, like, you didn't do anything. I was like, one was flying the ship, the other was on the guns. What do you even do, man? And he's like, oh, we all have our specialties. So they congratulate themselves for being saviors of the earth. And Lobo thinks to himself, well, I don't like that, because where I come from, if you save something, you're responsible for it. It belongs to you until you either kill it or it kills you. Also, he said his sorry, not sorry catchphrase somewhere in there. I don't know where. Not great. Not awful. Not the worst thing I've read. But not great either. I don't care about new Lobo. And that's not to say that we're not trying to make me care. Clearly, there is an attempt. But I just haven't connected with the character. He is unlikable in so many ways, and there is nothing to attach to say like, oh yeah, I understand him now. Like, no, he sucks. He's just an unlikable dude. As for this new crew, like, Jesus Christ, I couldn't care less. Luna, Rave, and then there was a third one I still can't even remember the name of, despite the fact I said it not like 2 minutes ago. Emily. Never could have told you that. So yeah, it's not doing anything to earn itself any favors. Art style's okay, not the best. It's just there. All in all, I can't give this above a 7, so I think I'm going to come down to a flat 6. I don't know how long this book goes on for, but frankly, I want it to get where it's going now. Swamp Thing number 36, written by Charles Soule, art by Jesus Saiz. So, the last issue was technically the annual, where Capucine died and was sent to the Green. That all happened. The issue before that, we were investigating the new mechanical intelligence, and they approached Swamp Thing and were like, hey, can we be buddies? And he was like, nah, just leave. But then Swamp Thing was told by the Parliament to kill the new intelligence before they did something rash, only to find out that the machines started burning Swamp Thing alive. So we open up with that. He is burning alive. We see the fire is spreading down into the Green. Capucine is there, and she's like, Jonah, brother Jonah, and she cuts the vine that is connecting Jonah up to Swamp Thing. She burns herself slightly in the process, but manages to save him from being burned. And we see up above the grove that the Parliament consists in has been sealed off by the flame. So Jonah's like, I warned him. I thought we would have had more time. They are nothing if not efficient. So we go back up to the machines, and the one named, I think it's Calculus, is like, oh, well, this was optimal, 99.9% certainty that Swamp Thing is now completely and utterly powerless. And then a giant green hand comes up from the ground, grabs the robots, and just squishes them in his hand. And Swamp Thing comes out of a tree, goes over to Calculus, and just like, I gave you a chance, and this is what you do. So Calculus is like, murder bots, go. So they start firing on Swamp Thing. He causes a bunch of giant Venus flytraps to dissolve them in acid. And then he comments like, oh yeah, you guys, you're taking straight lines and like just eat path of least resistance. I, however, like to get creative. So he boils them alive in acid. He goes to Calculus, the one remaining one, and he's like, do I make myself clear? And he's like, whoa, hold on there, bro. This is just a misunderstanding. He's like, all right, let's clear up the misunderstanding. I am everywhere. I am everything. And you cannot kill me, only annoy me. So if you do something like this again, I will absolutely destroy you. This is your last warning. And he crushes Calculus's head in between his fingers as he then walks back over to the grove and is just like, all right, gotta deal with this. So he reaches down into the green. He does what he can to pull it back up, and ultimately he is successful. So he looks back down and he's like, yo, you guys good? Are you safe down here? It's like, yeah, we're good. More of those are going to come, by the way. And Swamp Thing's like, yeah, I know. Look, I warned him, but I think you're right. Things are going to get worse. I got to go do something that I've been wanting to do for a while. But for now, I'm going to close up the grove again. If I need you, I will contact you directly from the green, because I can't sit here babysitting, okay? And so he closes up the grove, and Capuchin's like, what do you think he was supposed to go do? And he's like, I don't know, but at least he's finally paying attention. So a few things happen here. We intercut between the parliament of the machines, whatever that's called, the Calculus, like hive mind, and what Swamp Thing's doing. I'm going to handle what Swamp Thing's doing first, which is he goes to this giant, huge grate in the side of a cliff face, and he's like, hey, I know I shouldn't have taken so long. It's two-way street, though. You could have come to me, but like, this is important. And the grate opens up, and as he walks in, he goes to the stronghold of the Rots, which is led by Abigail in her Rot avatar form. And he reaches out for her, and she's like, no, you know we can't touch each other. That's a problem. And so I'm thinking, like, I had an idea involving a White Lantern ring, and she's like, don't. Look, we both know our lot in life. This is where it's at. Like, it's hard to see you. I know things need to be covered. By the way, I have suspicions that Anton is alive again. He's escaped the Rot. I don't know where he is, but he's probably weak. Is that what this is about? And Swamp Thing's like, no. We got a machine thing going on. So we get a cutaway there. But then we come back, and Swamp Thing is making out with Abigail, and it turns out that those are just like separate little bodies that they've made, because as soon as they start kissing, they just dissolve into each other's touch. And she's like, was that worth it? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. It hurts, but I like it. So at that point, Swamp Thing's like, look, I don't know what the machines are planning. If they show up on your doorstep, call me. I'll come running. Can I expect the same from you? And she's like, oh, absolutely. Yeah, give me a call, whatever. But, we shouldn't have to wait for robots to attack as an excuse to see each other. We should be able to do that beforehand, even if it hurts. And he's like, no, especially if it hurts. So then we go over to the Calculus stuff. And the Fortress of the Metal is what it's called. And apparently there are 3 of them, Calculus A, B, and C. And C was the one that was out and about. He was the one who was examining. And he's talking to A and B, sharing his process. And he's like, look, hear me out, guys. You guys think that we can just gather enough data about the avatars and we'll be able to fight them. However, I think that because all of the other kingdoms use avatars, like in an actual human being controlled sort of way, we should try that too, because we don't have enough data on it to say whether or not it's actually a weakness or if it's something that like we might be missing out on. And the other calculus are like, okay, no, that doesn't make any sense. It's just a weakness. Humanity is a weakness. But then we get introduced to Calculus Omega, who is seemingly the boss. He overrides the decision, and he's like, cool, pick an avatar. So they start working through the whole DCU. They're like, what about Cyborg? It's like, nah, he's got too many strong friends. Metallo, he's crazy. There's a guy named Earl J. Dukeston. unfamiliar with him, but they just say no. Then they say the metal men, and it's just like, those could work in the future, but they're not like humans, so it doesn't really work for the point we're making here. And like, what about Cyborg Superman? It's like, we ain't dealing with Brainiac. There's too much Brainiac in the DCU right now. So Calculus C puts out there like, okay, or C Calculus is like, I have an idea. Hear me here. We don't need someone who's already part machine. We just need someone who's willing to work with the machines, and then we can provide them the machines that they'll need. And Calculus Omega's like, I get what you're saying, but like, is there anybody who would give up their humanity like that to be a machine? And Calculus C is like, not specifically to be a machine, but to be an avatar. And we cut to Lady Weeds, who is in her hospital room with a broken neck, paralyzed. And he's like, I've made my choice. So I love it. I love the fact that these arcs just roll one into another. Like, it would have been so easy to just say that was the Lady Weeds arc and all that stuff where she had her plan, it didn't work, and now she's just gone. But we bring her back. We roll with it. It is a continuity that builds on itself ever since the beginning of this book in Scott Snyder's run. Because obviously we go back to Abigail as well. I like it. I really like the way this story is going. And the Machine's little world, all of the server they got going on, fantastic. I love the way that they show the Parliament deciding things via logical conclusions rather than like what's right or wrong. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to give this one... I'm going to give it an 8. I think it was kind of a 7.5 if I look at it in general, but then those first pages with Swamp Thing just chewing out Calculus C, it's so worth it. It's always a fun time to see Swamp Thing just be like, I am a god, stop messing with me. So yeah, 8 for this. Batman Eternal number 31, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fox, Higgins, and Seeley, art by Fernando Pasarin. So, just a little recap, last issue, Arkham Asylum totally exploded, but Alfred was down there inside of it. So we see what's going on with Alfred. He's still kind of hallucinating after the Scarecrow fear toxin stuff, and as he's trapped underneath some rubble, he sees an old lieutenant of his from back in his military days saying, status report, Sergeant, give me that. And Alfred's like, I'm stuck and I'm dying and everything's awful and I'm hallucinating you. And he's like, oh, do you remember the pyramid of survival? And he's like, yes, the foundation is the will to survive, the second layer is knowledge, and the third is training. And he's like, good job, soldiers, so get up. And we see that he's still trapped under rubble, but who comes to his rescue but Bane? And Bane lifts up the rubble off top of Alfred and says, oh yes, you may be dying, but not here. And so then we get a whole thing about the cops, fire departments, everything have surrounded the crater that was Arkham Asylum. Batman is still down inside, and Julia is there saying, hey, it's going to be hard for you to get out. What with the cops all after you? But I'm looking for an alternate exit. Meanwhile, she sees a couple of the Rogues Gallery have started climbing out of the hole, including Mr. Freeze, Clayface, and Mr. Zaz, and they are just attacking all the cops and firefighters up there. Meanwhile, Batman, who was down dealing with Joker's daughter, who had a bomb strapped to her chest, immediately Batman just rips it off of her, realizes it's made of plastic, and then like kicks her into a wall, and just like, all right, someone's messing with me. I need to get out of here now. So the cops are trying to deal with Mr. Freeze and all that, and Clayface. Obviously, they are outclassed entirely, and so Batman manages to jump out of the hole, and he takes care of Clayface and starts going after Mr. Freeze. The cops are like, oh, sir, it's Batman. They're talking to Bullock. They're like, sir, do we shoot? And he's like, no, you're not. I don't give you the right to shoot on this one. Batman, meanwhile, he's like, hey, this is all being orchestrated by something. I need you, Julia, to go check on your father's whereabouts, because there's something weird going on here. Also, figure out where Hush is, because I need him caught immediately. So we see Julia's like giving updates on, Imperceptible Man is just outside of town, so I'm feeding in the lens stuff, but you got this. And Batman goes in with flaming fists to attack Mr. Freeze. Meanwhile, underground, Bane is leading Alfred out of the tunnels. And he's like, why are you saving me? And Bane's like, you can be of use to me. You can still walk. That's all I need. And I can tell you're ex-military. And Alfred's like, you're keeping me behind you in case somebody attacks from behind, right? And he's like, yep. Try to make some noise in case you get killed. So Bane tries going down a specific tunnel, and Alfred puts his hand on his shoulder and says, no, wait, we should go this way. And Bane's like, if you touch me again, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, sorry, but this piece of rubble indicates part of the sewer system. It's all to a grid. I know where we are. I can get us out. And Bane's like, no, I'm leading. So at that point, Alfred introduces himself. He's like, oh, if we're going to be companions, my name's Alfred. And Bane tells him to shut up, but he doesn't notice that a bunch of weird shadow demon things have already captured Alfred, and they start attacking Bane as well. Meanwhile, in the Batcave, we figure out that Alfred was transferred over a day ago. So Julia comes to that as well, and she's like, oh no, my father was in Arkham the whole time. What's happening to him? So we see back in downtown Gotham, traffic jams like crazy. Everyone sees Arkham has been destroyed on the news. Vicky Vale gets out of a cab and is immediately accosted by Stephanie Brown Spoiler, who is just trying to outrun some guys with guns on her motorbike. And it seems like they're cops as well. But as she turns down an alleyway, she is blindsided by Hush, who's like, all right, well, guess I got to take care of you myself. So we see Batman has taken out the rest of the rogue gallery, but all the cops are now training guns on him. He says a code word to his bat plane, which causes a sonar thing to go off that causes all the cops to fall to their knees. And then we have Batman finding Hush on the satellite feed, and he's like, hey, he's out in the open. It looks like he's about to kill somebody, so you might want to get there quick. But at the same time, my father, Alfred, he's down in the Arkham pit. What if he's dying down there? And Batman's like, Joker's daughter was down there. Alfred's the type that's going to survive. I promise you he's going to be fine. And Julia's like, who are you trying to convince, me or you? And she's like, all right, yeah, sorry, you don't need that right now. Go on, go get Hush. So we see that Hush is about to kill Stephanie. He's got his gun pulled out on her. And on her bike, we see that there's some sort of SOS signal going off. Meanwhile, back down with Bane, he's fighting off all the shadow demons. Alfred's got one to himself who's about to kill him, but he manages to use his military training to attack the demon, knock it out, and actually manages to help Bane defeat a few more. And Bane's like, all right, cool, respect. Oh, you Green Beret? And he's like, nope, I was in the special services in Britain. And so they reach the end of a hallway. We see that it is completely blocked by rubble, and Alfred's like, I don't suppose you could get rid of some of this, right? And Bane just punches right through it. But as they get to the other side, they see it's still a solid wall. And he's like, there's nothing here. I thought you said that we were going somewhere. And Alfred leans against the wall and he says a code word, which causes a bunch of noxious gas to come out of the wall and knock out Bane. And we see that it was actually a bat cache. He gets up to the computer, says, this is Penny 1. I'm online. Subterranean comms are online. Does anyone need help? Batwing, who we thought was dead 2 issues ago, chimes up like, hey, I'm still here. I could use some help. And then everyone's just super happy to hear everyone else. And Batman's like, all right, cool. Let's get to work. I like it. I think it's a nice little issue. Obviously, I've read this entire story before, years ago. I remembered the Bane and Alfred thing being significantly longer. I mean, technically, Bane's just knocked out, so it's not to say that, it couldn't continue, but I remember it going on for, at least half a dozen issues. So we'll see if that comes back to be anything. For what it stands right now, solid writing, solid artwork. There is a few, the occasional weird face here. Fernando Pizarro has something about putting characters' eyes, too close together when they look directly at the camera, for lack of a better word. But all in all, it's a fine issue. So I'm going to say this one's a flat 7, and yeah, we'll see what happens next week. Future's End number 27, written by Azzarello, Lemire, Jurgens, and Giffen, art by Aaron Lopresti. So this issue picks up on Green Arrow Island. I swear they would have come up with a better name by now. And apparently everything's going according to plan. They're actually ahead of schedule. And Bart is talking to Arrow like, okay, cool. So you know where Cadmus Island is? We're ready to go. And Arrow's like, well, no, I don't know where it is, but we will soon. And she's like, I'm sorry. We're about to launch a full-scale armada, and you don't know where it is? And he's like, no. Look, here's what happened. When I faked my death, I hid a what Deathstroke thought was a weapon, and so he took it with him, but actually it was a tracking device. All I need to do is activate the transponder, and we'll be able to track down exactly where it is. It'll lead us right to him. So we then cut over to Metropolis. Lois Lane is getting home, and she notices someone is already in her apartment. Who is it? It's Tim Drake, under whatever stupid-ass fake name he's got. And he reveals that he managed to make a perfect duplicate of her Earth card in order to get access to her apartment. And she's like, oh, you're invading my personal space. You have no right. And he's like, yeah, kind of funny when that happens, isn't it, reporter lady? So at that point, he says, the whole reason I'm here is because Madison Payne, my ex-girlfriend, or girlfriend as far as she knew, went missing. And no one's seen from her in 2 days. She talked to you at some point. Do you know anything about her whereabouts? And she's like, no, nothing. But did something happen between you two? And he's like, yeah, I took your advice and was honest with her, and she dumped me for it. She's like, well, probably shouldn't have lied to her to begin with. So speaking of which, look at all this stuff. All this stuff that you said was meant for you, this mystery after Green Arrow's funeral. You going to walk me through this now? And he's like, fine, whatever. You got a matchbook that led you to my bar. This pyramid showed you visions of a prison, and the red arrow is basically a indication that it was meant for me because Red Arrow is the only one who knew I was still alive. Also, the coordinates are clearly coordinates. I don't know why you didn't trust that they were coordinates to begin with. And she's like, well, I flew out there and there was nothing. And it's like, okay, well, clearly there is something. Anyway, I'm out. And Lois is like, whoa, you're not going to help me? Like, this is a whole thing. Like, we can figure out what's at the coordinates. Like, don't you want to do that? And he's like, nah. I'm going to go find my ex-girlfriend, whatever she is to me right now. But you should definitely go check out the coordinates. It's a leap of faith, you know? So we cut back over to the island. We keep on getting cuts of all of the dead scientists, and all of their monitors have Brother Eye's logo on it. But we are more so following Deathstroke, Grifter, and Lana as they're making their way through the jungles. 50 Sue is off somewhere else. I don't care. She ends up, or they say that she's still trying to decide what team to be on, but ultimately this is just following Deathstroke and saying, look, we have a cache of the DNA of all the heroes that were on this island. We have to lock down that vault before Brother Eye can get to it, because otherwise he's just going to make an entire, like, super villain league out of the strongest heroes from Earth 2. And Grifter's like, okay, so we're going to destroy it, right? And Deathstroke's like, well, if it comes down to it, but it's not going to come down to it. We're just going to secure it. So Grifter and Lana want to get out of there, but the only person who's able to get them off the island because of biometric whatevers is Deathstroke, so they're forced to follow along. We then see Mr. Miracle is still jumping around. He was unaffected by the Brother Eye virus, and he sees all of his Earth 2 compatriots that are controlled, and he's like, that's weird. Why are they all acting so weird? Unless, of course, they're being controlled, and what happens when they return to normal? Because they've done a lot of killing in the meantime. Will they be able to live with that? And then Mr. Miracle realizes that his cover's been blown. His heat signature was scanned. Huntress jumps out, tries to attack him. Mr. Miracle just punts her off the edge of a building. She manages to come back up and deliver a kick, though. And we see Brother Eye speak through her saying, hey, you're a god. I'm kind of a god myself. Why don't we, see if we can make something happen here? And also, I am from your mother box as well. That's kind of my origination. I am anti-life. And Mr. Miracle's like, nah, I'm not buying that. And he just disappears. Huntress / Brother Eye has no idea where he went to. So we follow the Green Arrow Armada or whatever as they're making their way out onto the ocean, and he's just like, all right, time to test this transponder out. And immediately Onyx is like, hold up, you've never even tested the transponder? Surely you should have at least checked if that would have worked. And Oliver just says, my gizmos always work. So he turns it on. They do get a reading. They see the island. They're like, great, fantastic. Can we zoom in? Can we get some clarity as to what we're going into? And they zoom in and somehow get a perfect image of all of the OMACs just waiting at the docks, ready to attack. And Barda says, oh, this isn't just an assault. This is a war. So then we go over to Tim Drake's bar. He's not there at the moment, but McGinnis and Plastique are there. And they're just having a drink. They want to talk to Tim, but obviously since he's not there, McGinnis points out, hey, let's just go up to his apartment. It's right above here. Like, we can just break in. And she's like, oh, but what if he comes back? And Alfred chimes in saying, like, he's in Metropolis. Don't worry about it. I hacked into all the global airport data or whatever. So at that point, Plastique's like, oh, okay, we're going to look for clues. This is exciting. And Terry's like, no, actually, you stay here. I'm just going to go myself. So he gets Batmaned up. He goes upstairs. And Alfred's basically just saying, like, hey, how about you ditch the broad? Like, she's going to be a problem. And Terry's like, hey, look, I get what you're saying, but, like, we got to think about what's better for her. Her future was not very bright. And we see as he's sneaking through Tim Drake's apartment, he hears a creaking noise behind him. He doesn't see anything when he turns around, but then all of a sudden he's slammed against a few walls, and there is Batman, who says, all right, first you're going to tell me what you're doing in Tim Drake's apartment. Second off, you're going to tell me what the hell this suit's all about. And then all of a sudden a little explosive ball pops in through the window. Terry's ready for it. He knows what it is, and all the windows blow out as Batman is trying to react. So then we go back to Lois, who has hired another plane to go out to those coordinates. They're flying right over top of it. The pilot's just like, you're crazy. Like, I know you've done some crazy things to get a lead, but this is top tier stupid for you. And she's like, oh, well, we all take risks. This is a leap of faith. And she jumps out of the plane and starts to parachute down. And as she's staring down the blank ocean in front of her, she's like, all right, this might be a bit more of a leap of faith than I'm comfortable with. That's the issue. It's fine. It's all right. Again, compared to the first, like, 6 to 10 issues of this book, the biggest problem I had back then was they were trying to hit every storyline, every issue. And so we only got like one page to deal with each one, and it felt like nothing was happening. They finally stopped doing that, and now we get 2 to 3 to 4 pages of a couple of the different storylines. And I am so much more a fan of that because it feels like actual progress has been made. That being said, the story is also just not that captivating for me. I still like, it feels like we're almost done. You know, this book goes up to issue 48. We're on 27, but it feels like we're almost done. So I don't know what the stick that's going to keep us from being able to hit the end is, but I'm sure we're going to run into it eventually. I'm going to say this one is 6.5. This is nothing great, nothing awful. It's just there, and we'll see if it gets better next time. Earth 2 World's End number 5, written by Bennett, Johnson, and Wilson, art by The Crew. So we open up this issue where Alan Scott is blasting the face of Solomon Grundy, just full on, no holds fight. We're standing in the ruins that was Rio de Janeiro. And Grundy's just like, hey, the more you fight, the more you attack, like, the stronger I get because things keep on dying. Like, that's my power source, man. And he's like, oh, well, I took you out last time. I could take you out this time. But Grundy pulls up a bunch of dead corpses from around the fight. And immediately Alan's like, oh, damn you, Grundy. You're so evil. And as they are about to continue fighting, all of a sudden a voice interrupts them saying, like, all right, cut the crap. We're done with this. And we see in a representative from the green. I don't know what you call them. It's not an avatar, but like it's a person. And he says, yeah, your battle's over. Your alliance begins now. And immediately Alan's like, I'm sorry. You want me to partner up with that? Seriously? And he's just like, yeah, totally. There's a threat to the Earth and all of the different powers are coming together. The green needs to come up with the gray. And Grundy just laughs. And he's like, ha, you need my help. And then the power behind the green forces him to like projectile vomit, and he's like, you shut up, you got your own problems going on here. So Alan asks, okay, what's going up? Why would we need to team up with the gray? And the entity's like, no, not just the gray, all the different colors, every power that keeps Earth in balance. We cut down to Atlantis, which of course was being attacked by the Fury of Death, and the Queen of Atlantis is just breaks a glass dome over top of these corpses that are coming after her. Immediately the room starts flooding down, and she commands the ancient ones that she has summoned to protect the living, which I don't know how they would after she's about to flood the whole place, but she then decides to go swimming off to find her super ultra secret weapon, an eater of worlds sealed away for eons. And she makes her way down to the depths, to the tomb of the old gods, where she's willing to make a deal with the devil to save her people. So back in, I guess Shanghai now, they left Rio, we see that we get introduced to the different colors. There is the green, which represents all the grass life and whatnot. The gray, which represents death, obviously. There is also the white, which represents atmosphere and air and stuff like that. Blue, which represents the oceans, and red, which is the same as the red on Earth Zero. It's just all animals and stuff like that. And Grundy's like, okay, what if I don't want to help? And the entity's just like, well, then you're going to die with the rest of the planet, so you better help. And he's like, touche. So they say, all right, who are the other avatars? They say, all right, we'll get to that, we'll do that, but we have to work together as allies, all right? So let's work on that right now. So we go over to Amazonia, where Jimmy Olsen's trying to learn about the mother box. All of a sudden, the lights on the computer screens all flash up, and it says, Jimmy Olsen, do not be afraid. I am the mother box. I come from the source. You're going to die today. And Jimmy's just like, oh, okay, so cool. So we then go to London, where Flash, Dr. Fate, and Hawkgirl are fighting against, I think it's Famine. It's a giant, huge, hulking beast of a monster. Hawkgirl tries shooting at it. The bullets just dissolve against her skin. She's just like, yeah, your harmless projectiles mean nothing. And Flash realizes that these cufflinks and different armor it has on must be serving some sort of purpose, so he dismantles it at super speed, which then allows Dr. Fate to come in for a final magic blast or something, he says, and thanks to an ancient spell of reflection. So I guess he worked that one out. Back on Amazonia, we see Barda, Fury, and Scott are watching the World's Army just unload, get ready for war, whatever. And they're just like, you could help us out. You guys are like super strong gods or whatever. And they're just like, we should be out there fighting. We should be battling. And Mr. Miracle's like, okay, we'd have to boom tube out there to do that, and that would draw attention to us. We need to like go along with these humans in their weak and stupid ways. And that's where Michael Sloan steps up, Terry Sloan steps up. And he's like, well, let me show you what these weak and stupid humans can do. I have built a ship on the far side of the sun, and it is built by autonomous drones, and it has technology that the world has never seen, and odds are Apocalypse hasn't either, and we will be using it for our frontal assault. And the World's Army's like, how the hell did we not see this before? Like, we can see around the sun. Why is this whole thing? And he's like, I'm using dimensional camouflage, which blah, blah, blah magic stuff. So at that point, Commander Khan's like, Terry, you're not telling us something. What's going on with you, man? And he's like, oh, I'm not the only one with secrets. Isn't that right, Mr. Terrific? And Mr. Terrific's just like, I mean, I'm not ready to share that stuff quite yet. But he manages to bring them all out to a field, and he summons a bunch of T-spheres. But these are special T-spheres that work with a corrupted boom tube to teleport material between each of the boom tubes, creating a swirling vortex of destruction, and he calls them boom spheres, and they might have the potential to kill even a god. So then we go down and follow the main batch of our heroes, Batman, Red Tornado, the like, as they were down inside one of the fire pits and came against Desaad. Desaad's got his hands on Helena, and throughout whatever little two-panel fight they got going on here, both Desaad and Helena end up falling into one of the fire pits. And immediately, Power Girl and Batman are like, oh god, no. What have we done? She's gone. Jesus Christ, what do we do? And it's revealed that Batman's like, okay, sorry, I gotta pull this one out now. Apparently he put a tracker on Helena. It shows that she's still alive, and so he opens up his mask, downs a whole bunch of Miraclo in order to get back up to fighting strength, and he's like, yeah, okay, anybody got a problem with that? I'm gonna go save my maybe granddaughter. And so they start making their way deeper down into the fire pits, following the tracking thing. They say, like, oh, there's a lot of technology down here, but, like, it seems like it's protection for something. What could they be protecting so far down here? Batman and Power Girl go ahead, and they call back to Red Tornado, and they say, Lois, do not come down here. Stay up where you are. And she's just like, what? What are you talking about? I got to see what's going on here. And she comes into the next room, and inside we see Superman, who is not okay. It's hard to say exactly what's wrong with him, but he is beaten, he is bloodied, he is bruised, and he is not okay. And Red Tornado, Lois does not take that well. So that's the issue. I don't know. I just don't feel like I have a good grasp on this one yet. It's only been 5 issues. I made a complaint over in the Earth 2 book that it feels like the events happen in this book. This is the main book now, and Earth 2 is just supplemental. But it also doesn't feel like this book has actually told me what the main things are yet. Apocalypse is on its way. Got it. But, like, what are we doing with the Parliament of Earth? What are we doing with this fire pit? We found Superman again. Is that going to be a permanent thing? I'm fine with there being mystery, but I don't have a guiding principle yet. I don't know what this event/weekly is about. So once we get that, I'm sure I'll like it a lot more. But right now it just feels like, oh, you got to tune in next week to find out what's actually happening. And we're just going to do that 26 times in a row. So all in all, this one's probably 6.5. It's not a 7. Yeah, I'm going down to a 6, actually. It doesn't earn the 0.5. I'm just waiting for it to impress me, and frankly, I'm getting a bit tired of it. So maybe don't put out 3 weeklies at once, DC. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this November 5th, 2014. And I said the date again. I said November 5th. So you know what? I went through a whole episode. I've earned this. So it's Guy Fawkes night over across the pond. You know, that's neat. That's cool. That's great. That's not what I care about tonight. What I care about tonight is, of course, it was Election Day here in America. And just to make you very painfully aware, 4 years ago, during the last worst time of my life, I had spent far too long constantly updating and checking results and new data and stuff like that. And it kind of really stressed me out for a very long period of time. So I'm telling you that so that you can check in on me next week. Because if this isn't settled by next week, I might very well be dead. It's entirely within the realm of possibility. So if there's no new episode, just know it's the American legal system's fault. Or election systems, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, that's all I got to say. I'm done with it. I won't even mention the winner next week, I promise you. So, what do we have coming out next week? Next week, there's only 11 comics. We will continue with our escapism via, in no particular order, Batgirl, Batman, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League United, World's Finest, New Suicide Squad, Constantine, Clarion, and our 3 weeklies, Batman Eternal, Future's End, and World's End. So that's all we got coming out. I'm pretty sure Green Lantern Corps is the only one that's any sort of event or anything, but Batman is definitely the endgame arc going on, which is regarded as many as pretty good. So check that out if you haven't. Anyway, in terms of contractual stuff, I'll just go ahead and blast my way through all this. If you have anything you'd like to add on any of the comics I talked about this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and hit us up on one of our many social media platforms. We have a Discord, we have a Patreon, we have a subreddit. All those things are either on screen or in the description, so be sure to check that out. But hey, yes, you, thank you so much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to interact with it positively on whatever the network thing you're doing. Usually it's a thumbs up, but if you want to give it a star, try to find the star button on the thumbs up page. It's much harder than you think it would be. Either way, I'm done. Have a good night. I will see you next week. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.